everyone. This is Georgi from the Superhuman podcast with Georgi Nenov. And today I have the extreme pleasure of having Peter Sage on the Superhuman podcast. Something that I have never dreamt it will become possible. But actually it is happening today on the 4th of April and can't wait for you guys to listen to our conversation. But before we go to it, please note that these are the partner companies that are making this podcast possible. Понякога обратната връзка е буквално под носа ни. Ето какво ми написа Яница, която е основният отговорник за уебсайта на Свръхчовекът. Здравей, Георги! Искам да ти споделя моята обратна връзка за Storytel и по-специално за детските аудиокниги. Майка съм на две момчета, на 4 и на 8 години. Откакто ползвам услугата, всяка вечер им пускам аудиокнижка преди сън. Те очакват този момент с нетърпение и вече обожават аудиокнигите. Могат да прекарат цял час в слушане, завити под топлата завивка, което от своя страна улеснява и самия процес на заспиване. Искам да ти благодаря сърдечно на теб и на Storytel, защото благодарение на вас децата ми неусетно се пренасят в света на книгите. Заедно открихме един нов и различен вариант за усвояване на безценни знания и емоции. Ако искаш да разбереш кои са книгите, които Яница и синовете й препоръчват, заповядай на www.thesuperhumanpodcast.net/kids. Огромни благодарности и за нашите партньори от Dynaphos, които ни осигуряват прекрасната техника, с която записваме аудио и видео епизодите на Свръхчовекът в последните няколко месеца. Те са световно известна търговска марка за професионално студийно оборудване, произведено по високи стандарти за качество и съобразено с най-новите тенденции в тази област. Предлагат специализирани решения за фотография, видео и кино. Ако развивате стартиращ бизнес, имате нужда от цялостна бизнес стратегия и финансиране за устойчив растеж, Новатор България са хората, които вярвам, че могат да ви помогнат. Основателят на компанията, Даниел Петков, е моят най-добър приятел, моят приятел за цели и моят съветник в бизнес развитието и изграждането на Свръхчовекът с Георги Ненов. През идните месеци 100 български компании напълно безплатно ще получат оценка на проектите си, а 10 най-добри от тях ще участват в програма на компанията за набиране на рисков капитал. Победителят в цялата програма ще получи директна инвестиция от Новатор. Присъединете се към компаниите, на които Новатор вече помогна. Това са CloudCard, Recheck, Travel by Electric, ProLaspos и Our Love. Научете повече на novator.bg. SMS Bump е платформа за SMS маркетинг в онлайн търговията с клиенти като IKEA, GoPro, Патагония и много други. През 2020 година компанията беше придобита от американската Yotpo, което стана най-голямата сделка за придобиване на български стартъп в историята. Целта на SMS Bump за 2021 година е да разширят екипа си до над 80 души и то не само с технически специалисти. Освен гъвкавото работно време, компанията предлага всеки да избира сам мястото, от което работи. Ако това звучи като твоето място и искаш да станеш част от екипа, който променя бъдещето на електронната търговия, разгледай актуалните позиции на сайта на SMS Bump. Успех! Hi Peter, thank you so much for being on the Superhuman podcast.
George, what an absolute pleasure. I'm loving the setup here. I'm loving the energy and excited to see what we can do.
It's an amazing story for having you here because it all comes down to personal connections, to meeting nice people that want to build a better future and to help each other. I have built the podcast on the concept of Stephen Covey's fourth habit from the 7 habits of the highly effective people, which is always think win-win. So I thought, okay, how can I create a win-win environment in the podcast, helping others? So I met Ani Grozdanova. She's doing the Wim Hof seminars here. And she said, okay, I can introduce you to Dimo. Dimo said, yeah, I listened to your podcast. I know who you are. I like what you're doing. So here you are today, all because of the power of creating a nice and solid connections through the actions that people do. And thank you for being here. Really, I really appreciate your time. It's Sunday and you guys are busy, but you have decided to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're busy trying to add as much value as we can, and what better way to do that than to take time out and come and have the privilege of being on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. You're a motivational speaker with a way bigger experience than me. You started 30 years ago. Can you briefly go back in time just to say why did you quit school? I know the story, but for my listeners in Bulgaria and probably listeners that are not Bulgarian, it will be interesting to go through your thoughts. Why did you quit school, and why did you start like your entrepreneurial journey? Because for me, entrepreneurs are very, very important part of the whole economy and the whole society. The logo of the podcast is an atlas, and if you've read Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, you know why the entrepreneurs are very, very important part of it. But what is your story? What's the context behind your entire journey as a motivational speaker, serial entrepreneur?
Great question. And the first thing I will start off with is just by kind of deframing a little bit any of the specialness that we tend to ascribe to people that we see or put them on a pedestal because they have maybe a few steps ahead or further ahead on the journey than we have. And first off the bat, I'm just a normal guy. I dropped out of school at 16, and there were some specific reasons for that. One is I wasn't smart enough to stay. I didn't see the value in traditional education. The great Jim Rohn said that formal education may help you make a living, which is quite questionable these days. But informal education, such as what people get from your podcast, can help them make a fortune. And so at 16 years old, I dropped out of school because I saw school on the traditional sense really teaching you two things: how to pass tests and work for somebody else. And I didn't really resonate with that. I also had an epiphany, an awareness that really stated that if I'm going to go and get a job, then by the very definition of getting a job, I'm going to be paid less than what I'm worth. Why? Because even if it was a good paid job back in whenever it was, 1980, whatever, let's just say it's $100 a week. Well, the job has to be worth more than $100 a week, because if it isn't, then there's nothing in it for the business owner. So by definition, there has to be margin on the employment in terms of value for the business owner, which means by definition, I'm always going to be paid less than what I'm actually worth if I decide to get a job. And that didn't resonate with me. I didn't know what I was going to do, so I quit school. And I had a belief at the time, which I still have, which says if you jump in the deep end, you can only swim. So that was really the impetus behind me wanting to get out of the restraints of formal education, which, if you look into history, it does an exceptional job of what it was created for, which is taking people out of a feudal system and breeding in conformity and breeding out creativity. When we transitioned from a feudal system into an industrial revolution, we needed people to show up on time in factories, sit in rows, not question authority, not think, oh, what happens if I press the red button or pull the blue lever? None of that. People get hurt if you do that. So in order for the machine to work, we needed to create an educational system that essentially got people into becoming compliance people. And that is the antithesis, the opposite of entrepreneurship. And I think I always had, as many people do, that little voice inside that says, you were born to captain your own ship. Now, not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, and that's okay. Not everybody needs to be. It's not about better or worse. Some people are left-handed, some people are right-handed. It doesn't matter. But for the entrepreneurs that have that calling, that innate ache in the soul to say, I'm born to captain my own ship, you don't want to be a deckhand on somebody else's. So I was out of there, and that was my game.
Yeah, I had this similar realization later on in my life when I realized that freedom comes very high in my value list. So freedom, being able to decide on my own, to make my own decisions, is something that came after I created my podcast. Because every time I've worked without being given the freedom to choose my own decisions and act the way that I think I should. Every time I've quit, I felt like I've been suppressed, and I don't like being told what to do without putting my own creative input into it. So captaining your own ship is something that I probably say in every single episode. Because when you are the captain in your own ship, you decide which way to go and which people you want on board and which you don't want to work with. So, but it goes back to having a business and having a job. The one has higher risk than the other. It's called the entrepreneurial risk. When you start some venture and you don't know if it's going to be successful or not, but you cannot know if it's going to work if you never try. Tell me about Peter's Toys. Tell me about how it's all started.
Well, just coming back to your comment about one has higher risk, I personally believe that being employed carries much higher risk because you're no longer in control of your salary. In other words, that most people take a job because of something called job security, but essentially what job security translates into is the CEO's ability to run his or her business. In other words, when you captain your own ship, when you start your own business, you're in charge of the variables. You get to make your decisions. You get to set what you think you are worth and work towards it. All of that goes away in a heartbeat. And in the current society, the current economic climate, we've had a lot of people that suddenly realize that not being in charge of their own income was actually far riskier than being able to take off and try something for themselves. So yeah, I dropped out of school. I started work for my father for a short while when I was young. My dad owned his own job. He kind of had a scrapyard, a junkyard, where cars go at the end of their life. And that was a great playground for me as a kid growing up, but I never really saw myself working for dad. Plus, parents never pay you enough. So it's kind of child labor that they get away with because it's a family. And I decided to leave. I let go of my dad and I had my last week's pay, which was £40 at the time. And I paid my mum £10 board for board and lodgings. I paid my friend £10 I owed him. And I had my last £20 to my name. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do now? But I also realized I hadn't got a lot to lose. And I wasn't born with a silver spoon. My parents were pretty much working class, trying to build themselves up. And as a result of that, I decided that I was going to swing the bat. I bought £15 worth of toys from a wholesaler. And I remember driving to a field where what we have in England called a car boot sale, like a flea market in America. And I wound the window down in this little Mini. And I was in this Mini because I was allowed to drive anything in the junkyard nobody else wanted to buy. So you can imagine the level of cars that I had. In fact, my Mini had 2 gears that didn't work. And I wound the window down and I handed my last £5 to my name through the window as the fee to go onto the field, wondering if I'd ever see it again. And I had to put a blanket on the floor. I couldn't afford a table, plus it wouldn't fit in the Mini. And I laid out my toys and I tried to sell my £15 worth of toys. I ended up selling them for £30. I doubled up. And what was very interesting was that through that process, I also noticed that I went back the following week. I bought £5 worth of toys. I put my £5 through the window and I built up over 6 or 7 weeks until I got enough to cover a market stall and started running markets, Pete's Toys. I was Pete the Toy Boy. But the interesting thing, and this is where my real journey of personal growth started, is that I realized that some days I had good days, some days I didn't have good days in terms of income. But I was selling the same toys to the same people in the same demographic at the same price. And the only correlation I noticed was the mood that I was in. If I was in an upbeat mood, I would sell more toys. If I was in a downbeat mood, for some reason, people just wouldn't come and buy. And I made an early correlation between my inner world attitude and my outer world results. And that was a huge breakthrough for me because nobody taught me that in school.
It seems like a good tactic sales-wise to be in a good mood and to be energetic because people like to see the smiles on other people's faces and they build better rapport when they want to talk to people that they like. It comes back to what we discussed in the beginning, that I did the podcast without video in the beginning, so people can judge on the words and the energy that's generated through the conversation and not on the looks. Mm-hmm. But it still sends a very positive way, like a very positive signal through the ears because it goes directly to the brain. But would you say that's a very nice sales technique that people need to work on it before working on 10 ways to sell more, sell better, etc.?
If you see it as a technique, you're going to disconnect because now you're stuck in your head trying to make your being energetically connected. So it should become who you are, not what you're trying to do. And so people buy people before they buy their products, ideas, and concepts. But people also have a built-in BS detector. So they know when you're not being authentic. There's a different energy, a different spark, a different demeanor about somebody who shows up wanting to add value versus somebody who's trying to look like they're adding value to get something from you. We've all experienced it in relationships. We've all experienced it with salesmen, and you can tell. And so letting go of the technique aspect and just showing up with an intention. How do I serve my customer? How do I how do I delight my customer? How do I do what's right, not what gets me the most commission, is a far better technique for getting more commission than it is trying to manipulate the system.
It's the same because I've been to the NLP practice and master, and everything goes to the Dude's pyramid of neurological levels. And identity, like the only rule there is that the identity changes everything below it, like belief, strategy, environment, etc. So even when I was explaining the 7 Habits book in one of the events here in Bulgaria, I explained it through this neurological concept of changing identity means changing your life. So I'm very happy that you're saying it, because people think that results in any field of their life come because of strategy only, but it comes from identity mainly. Even with like quitting smoking, cutting fat, being better in sales and business. So I'm very happy that you're saying that identity rules everything like below it, and it's not about the technique of trying to act as a smiling and a nice person, but actually your identity is like being not very friendly, not very outgoing towards others.
Understood. And we've lived in a world for way too long where the predominant thought is, oh, are you in business to business or are you in business to consumer? Well, no, you're human to human. That's the new business of the 21st century. It's about people want to be felt. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want to, if one thing I'll share with the listeners and the viewers here, if you think that in order to solve a problem, let's say you're in a service industry, in order to solve somebody's problem, you need the right qualifications, you need the right experience. Let's say you're a coach, or you want to be a coach. What most people do in that scenario is they want to go to try to get certified so that they can feel certain enough that they are qualified to go serve the client. Well, your client doesn't care about your piece of paper on the wall. Your client doesn't care if you're a best-selling author. It doesn't care if you have X amount of experience. Your client cares, can you solve their problem? And what I found is that if you can articulate other people's pain better than they can, they will trust you to solve their problem. Because so many people are trying to sell their qualifications rather than understand their client. So you don't need a best-selling book. You don't need to go to the NLP course and then do the master prac and then the trainer prac and then the trainer prac, because what you're really doing is you're looking for skills to replace certainty. Yeah. And that will keep you on a hamster wheel forever, because skills are an external vehicle that people are using to try to cover up an internal hole called a lack of certainty. Well, if you give me somebody with no skills and total certainty, I'll back that horse every day of the week, versus somebody who's been to all the courses and still doesn't trust themselves, still have that certainty. So again, if you can articulate your client's problems better than they can, they will trust you to solve them. You position yourself as an expert through empathetic understanding, not through flashing certificates on the wall.
Yeah. I totally understand your point, and I fully agree. Just to want to explain something a bit harder. People go to these courses to have this paper on the wall, yes, but understanding the putting yourself in the context of what you're learning and understanding yourself better makes you more like able to articulate what you see in other people, what in other people's problems. For I just want to explain a bit better. When I did NLP practitioner, it was all about me understanding myself better, not about me trying to sell other people.
Yeah.
So this is what I initially wanted to say. And if you like use the context through your own self and like learn from it for yourself, then you can understand others better.
Most people aren't coming from that place.
Yeah.
They're coming from a place of trying to cover up the fear that they're not enough. It's the primary human fear we have, the fear that we're not enough, not good enough, not certain enough, not good looking enough, tall enough, short enough, fill in the blank. It doesn't matter. Old enough, young. The challenge is that if you are being driven by a place of insecurity, you're running away from something to try to get something, as opposed to being inspired towards something to become more of something. And if you can switch that energy, that direction of travel, or the reason for the direction of travel, then you have a far more or a far higher level of empowerment that other people are going to be noticing and buying into and trusting. It's great to know yourself, but if you're trying to know yourself because right now you feel that you're not good enough, or you can't go help somebody unless you do X, Y, or Z, that energy of fear is still going to carry through. Whereas if you say, hey, listen, I was born good enough, I don't need anything, therefore I'm free to go choose what I want, that has a different energy behind it. And this message has been given throughout history. I mean, in fact, if you go to, for the Judeo-Christian faith, if you go to the Bible, the first story in the Bible is the Garden of Eden, essentially. And it's an allegory. It's all allegory. It's all story to teach. If you actually think that somebody created sin across the planet because they ate from a magical tree because of a talking snake, then we need to talk, right? So if you understand that what the story is giving is a valuable insight, there's the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. The tree of life is good. Eat from that. The tree of knowledge, not good. Don't eat from that. Bad snake. Now, what they're saying is that everything that you need is within you now. Connect to life. Life is the source of who you are. If you think you need to go to the tree of knowledge because there's something missing, not good. You're free to choose from the tree of knowledge when you no longer need it to cover up an insecurity because you're ignoring the tree of life. And so knowing that you're already good enough, everything you have is within you now, which again was the main message. Where is the kingdom of heaven if you look at the Christian aspect to it? Right? Is it down the corner, turn left, up the stairs? No. The kingdom of heaven is within. You have everything within you right now. And if you're looking to become an entrepreneur, if you're looking to become a better salesperson, if you're looking to, you need to know that you're already good enough. Now, from that place, go learn some skills to give you some strategy. But if you're trying to learn the skills to try to cover up the fact that I don't think I'm good enough, therefore I need to eat from the tree of knowledge because I'm ignoring the tree of life and putting myself down, then it's bad snake.
Yeah. Everything that comes to my mind at the moment is one of the stories that I've heard on this inside track about your mate that thought that to be an entrepreneur, he had to own a business. So it goes back to identity and perception. Like, is the perception of a business guy, a businessman or entrepreneur, the guy that has a business, or identity of like being a person that solves problems and gets fees for it?
Understood. Again, take the whole concept of being a runner. Now, what makes somebody a runner? You can't say, well, it's because they have legs. Why? Because then everybody would be a runner. But some people don't see themselves as their runners. Yeah, somebody's couch will be very testament to that, and the dent in the middle of it. But your identity, as you said, governs everything. If I see myself as a runner, I'm going to want to run. And if I don't run for a few days, I'm going to get angsty. I'm going to resist lockdown because now I don't have to run. If I don't see myself as a runner, I'm going to be saying, hey, great, more popcorn and Netflix. So our identity isn't down to anything in terms of skills. It's not down to anything in terms of biology. It's everything down to how I see myself and how do I show up in accordance with the identity that I've given myself. If you don't see yourself as an entrepreneur, if you see yourself as an employee who wants to be an entrepreneur, you're never going to be one. You're never going to spot the opportunities that are out there every day of the week, because opportunities are there for entrepreneurs. And if you think you need the opportunity first in order to call yourself an entrepreneur, you're going to miss the message. The cart is before the horse. So no, I'm an entrepreneur. Yeah, but you work for somebody. I don't care. That's my temporary disguise. Yeah, I'm an undercover employee masquerading as a employee. Really, I'm a secret agent of being an entrepreneur, and therefore you'll start spotting opportunities in your company. You'll start, become an entrepreneur. You'll start spotting opportunities when you walk down the street, when you're talking to friends, when you're listening to other people in the lineup at Starbucks. You'll be hearing opportunity because you see yourself as an entrepreneur, and that's what entrepreneurs do. If you're a health coach, you're going to listen to people talk about health. Now, it's everything's out there, but what you tune into is governed by how you see yourself. And unfortunately, most people set the rules of the game up. For example, let's take money. Oh, I want to be wealthy. Oh, what has to happen for you to be wealthy? I need lots of money. Well, then you're never going to be wealthy. Well, what do you mean? Because now you're always coming from scarcity, trying to be wealthy. When you see yourself as being wealthy, you'll start attracting a lot of wealth. But until that happens, you're going to see yourself as currently being poor. What do you think your life's going to be focused on?
Being poor.
Being poor. It's not rocket science.
It's the same thing in because the other business that I run is helping others lose weight generally. And losing weight is building identity of being a person that eats healthy food and exercise regularly.
Yep.
Not about lifting weights or about eating that specific diet. Just caring and taking identity of being a healthy person that moves and eats and sleeps and controls the stress, and then everything comes from it. And it's hard for people to perceive that everything that they have built as eating habits in the last 30 years are something that they need to change in order to change their results, because, you know, Einstein's quote that if you're doing the same thing expecting a different result, this is the definition of madness. So correct. Yeah, everything's like happens step by step with smoking as well. Like you have the identity of smoking. I'm
really glad you said that. It's very impressive because health is one of my values, as you can see. And I've spent a lot of time around personal trainers, and the biggest challenge I see with most personal trainers or most health coaches is that, again, they're trying to change behavior without changing identity. And the challenge is people aren't fat because they eat too much. They're fat because they have a dysfunctional relationship to food. And that relationship is governed by identity. So getting people to shift that relationship to food, just like people aren't poor or in debt because they don't earn enough money. You can have 100 people earn different amounts and be just as in debt or broke. People are in debt because they have a dysfunctional relationship to money. And so again, shifting that identity first, everything else will take care of itself. It's like a chiropractor. You make one adjustment on the spine and everything else lines up. You're not treating the symptom, you're now going to the cause. So I'm sure your clients are experiencing a lot of growth in that area, or reduction in growth if you're talking about weight terms.
Yeah, of course. Not all of them, but you know, you cannot do the push-ups for your
understood,
the guys in your programs. So here comes the next question, which is for me more important thing. How do you change your own identity? Because if for me, like understanding it a bit more, because I've been spending 5 years talking to people like you, like local level, but generally, I have the awareness that if I have a problem and I have the awareness that I have the problem, I can start looking for solutions. So I can start looking into like actions and people to talk to and ideas to read through and comprehend and try to comprehend. But what would be your advice for people that have identity that they want to change?
Great question. First, one has to look at the whole concept around identity, which is nothing more than a label. It is a label linked to self-belief. And there is an identity we have to get to first before we start creating something moving forward. For example, a lot of people have socially conditioned identities. I am a parent, I am an employee, I am a instructor, I am whatever it may be. And as soon as we adopt an identity, our behavior will start following in accordance. You want to see people's identities, go queue up behind them in a supermarket and see what food they buy. You pretty much be able to see what they're like in terms of their identity around health. Yeah, for those that are, see themselves as tired, stressed, and busy, they've got convenience foods. For those that see themselves as sort of more, let's say, nutritious, they will have different choices. For those that are vegetarian or vegan, same thing. But they're all still labels. And labels are put on with Velcro, not super glue. And the ultimate label people need to do, or what people need to do to begin with, is to take off the labels that they already have. Let me ask you a question. Who are you without your name?
I'm a dreamer. I'm a podcaster. I'm a friendly person that likes talking to other people, especially people that are leading by example.
Totally great answers. One of the challenges of that is that everything that most people say at that point, case in point here, is that that's what you do.
Profession.
It's not what you are. And very few people get to even close to even asking the question, who am I without my name? You start to get a sense of who you are under the labels. And the predominant label that we need to get to is I am full stop. When you're comfortable with being who you are, you can choose a label after it. But if you don't like the label you're wearing, therefore you're trying to change it. Oh, I'm fat and I want to be thin. And so you resist being fat. Well, you're only going to attract more behavior in accordance with who you still are. Mm. Until you become finally okay being fat, so you don't label that anymore as derogatory, you say, it's I am full stop. You can now choose to be thin. But until you get to that place of I am full stop, you're always going to be chasing the label swapping game. Or you're not going to realize that the labels you currently have that were given by other people most of the time were given as Velcro. Most people walking around, oh, I'm not good enough. I'll never amount to anything. I'm not a singer.
Not a good parent.
I'm not a good parent. Yeah, I'm just not cut out for that. You ever heard that one? Oh, I'm just not cut out for that. Well, I've got news for you. Yeah. Nobody's cut out for anything. You want to get on an airplane? Yeah. You speak to the pilot and say, oh, did you go to pilot school? Oh, no, I just felt I was cut out for this. No, I'm getting off the plane. I want to know somebody's been through the school. But to start with, if you really want to make progress, you have to take the current labels off and be okay with who you see in the mirror. If you're complaining at anything, which is all the labels of insecurity, inadequacy, most of which were given by people who had absolutely no right to do it, or even if they meant well.
Like parents.
Like parents. They were doing it from a place of wanting to serve your best interest, even if you think they had a lousy way of doing it. The impact of that label can only be lasting if you choose to believe it. And when you realize that is put on with Velcro, you can take off any label. Yeah. I'm flat-chested. Compared to what? Right? Says who? Nobody has the right. You're going to see that as derogatory. No, you're going to destroy your own level of uniqueness by not living up to somebody else's imaginary, silicon-enhanced cover shot. No. Who you are is beautiful. There's many flowers in the garden, but just because you're not a rose doesn't mean to say you're not good enough. Name me one flower that's faulty.
None.
No. So when you appreciate your own uniqueness as who you are, I am full stop, and I'm happy with that. Yeah, love handles and everything. Yeah, low IQ and everything, poor bank balance and everything. That's who I am right now. I'm then free to choose who I want to become. At that point, you have freedom from your previous condition. If you're trying to change who you are, good luck. Never going to happen. Stop resisting who you are and simply choose a different path to walk. If you're, and the metaphor that I'll give people here to sort of bring this home is that imagine you're in an art gallery. And as we're in the art gallery of life, and you walk into a room and you don't like the artwork that's on the wall. Let's say it's Picasso. You think the guy was on drugs, right? This is offending artwork. I hate this artwork. It's disgusting. And you call the curator and you demand that the curator remove this horrible artwork. Well, what's going to happen in that scenario? You've got no right to change anything in that room. We're all guests in this world. But you have every right to walk down the corridor and enter the room of Van Gogh or Monet. See, a lot of people are looking at the artwork on the wall of the gallery of their life, and they don't like their bank balance. They don't like their body, their relationship, and they're complaining about it. Well, I can tell you right now, you want to tattoo this on the inside of your eyelids. Complaining about your current circumstances is the glue that keeps you tied to them. When you can let go of trying to change the artwork on the wall and feel free to choose to walk into a new part of your life to create new artwork, then you will have a different energy around that and you won't be tied to the previous BS of trying to complain. Does that make sense?
Totally. I have a quote that I remember. I'll never forget. I got it from Addicted to Success, the podcast that inspired me. And I don't know who the author is. He was talking with Joe, and it was something like, just rephrasing here, complaining about your life and your situation is just letting everyone else around you know that you don't have any control over your own life. Which is basically what you said. You need to own it and look for answers and solutions for it. Like for this is one of the best questions that I've heard on the podcast, actually, because I prefer to have better questions than better answers. And the question is, who am I without my name? It's something that I really liked, because even my I have this affirmation that is it starts with I'm Georgi Nenov, and it's me with my name. I probably should change it to I am, and then I am Georgi Nenov. It's like I'm really taking this, and something that I took from your book and really want to go into now is the power of questions, because here comes the very, very powerful question. And you said that basically the questions are the steering wheel of the mind, if I can remember correctly. I like to consider myself as person that through the interviews makes the listeners and the viewers ask better questions to themselves, because also Toни Робинс has said that like the quality of your questions determine the quality of your life. Mm-hmm. And I'm a firm believer in that. People just have their own answers, but they don't ask good questions to themselves, even not to the others, just starting from your own self. So why do you think, can you explain why the questions are so important in the way that people's mind is changing, and then how their life changes afterwards?
Sure. As I said, questions direct focus. They really are the steering wheel of the mind. And so if we are putting our attention on something, our energy will go there, it expands. You want to bring energy to something, you'll energize it. You bring neutrality to something, you neutralize it. You take your energy away from something, it'll minimize in your awareness. So questions direct focus, which direct energy. Now, when it comes to understanding the role of the mind's primary role, it's got several roles, but the primary role of the mind is to justify your current behavior to be in alignment with your current emotional state. Meaning that if the alarm goes off at 6 a.m. and you're tired, the mind's job is to figure out the reason why you should press the snooze button. If you are in an argument and you're angry, the mind will tell you exactly why. It'll justify why you shouldn't apologize, why it's the other person's fault. Now, we may calm down, come to our senses and apologize afterwards, but in the moment, the mind's job is to justify our behavior in the moment to be in alignment with our current emotional state. Now, if we follow that, we basically become this automated sequence of justification righteousness. And that's not where growth happens. We're born to grow and contribute. We are not born to perceive we're in a comfort-centric experience. If you follow that, you're always going to get a feedback from life that's going to be painful. So when it comes to asking better questions, it allows us to break that cycle of self-justification, because it lifts us up out of that automatic program. For example, if you realize that we have this dynamic tension going on a lot of the time, we have two systems in the body. We have a nervous system, which is part of our biology, that connects us to the physical. And that nervous system is hardwired for comfort, which is great. It stops us from sitting too close to a fire. It stops us from sitting on an ant's nest. It's very useful when it's giving us feedback and warning signs and red lights about discomfort. But if we associate to thinking life is just a physical experience, we will seduce ourselves into thinking that life is comfort-centric, and that's never going to take you down the path of your potential. Instead, ask a better question. Who am I really? What is the part of me that makes me? Well, if I ask that question, then I'm not going to look at my body. I have a different body now than I had 20 years ago. I'm probably going to have another different body in 20 years from now. I don't care how many creams or vitamins we put on, your body's going to change. It's part of the rule set. But if I only identify with the physical part, I'm going to identify with a comfort-centric experience. But that's not who I am. What makes you, George, you, is the invisible. It's the non-physical. It's your personality, your sense of humor, your dreams, your goals, your aspirations, your vision, your sense of who you are, your values. That's what makes you, you. If you take that out of you and put it in somebody else, well, guess what? You're you with a different body. So the essence of who we are is non-physical. Now, I'm not here to discuss labels or theology or philosophy. I don't want to run down those rabbit holes, because most people get too into defending a position that they, ultimately the truth with a capital T is we don't know the truth. So learn to live in the space of a question, but just ask better ones. Mm-hmm. So if we realize that the non-physical part is the main part of who we are, then let's use the label of the soul. What is our soul hardwired for? Because I can promise you that isn't comfort. See, our soul is wired for growth. Why? Because everything in this incredible universe operates by two laws when it comes to nature, and that is the law of growth and contribution. We grow so that we can give more of who we are, but you don't grow in a comfort zone. You don't change in a comfort zone. You don't mature in a comfort zone. You grow through challenge. Mm. You go ask an athlete who won the gold medal if they want to try and skimp on their workouts. Of course not. If they're not walking out where they can't lift their arms, then they haven't trained. So if we have a body that is wired for comfort, but a soul that is wired for growth, the question you should be asking is, which one am I listening to?
Absolutely. Have you read Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's Flow?
Flow.
Yeah. The zone is where you challenge your body. So you're just on the edge of your present abilities, but the only way to grow is to lift hard, like heavier weights than you lifted like last time. I even had a practice with it. I tried to lift my maximum. I tried to squat the maximum for 50 days. And I lifted my personal best with 25% from 100 to 125 kilos. Only squatting. This was my only routine in the gym for around 50 days. And I didn't get injured. I was just doing this because it was taking a lot of my energy and my nervous system was reacting to it. But it worked miracles. Mm-hmm. Like lifting your weight. I'm not a professional athlete. I just do it for my own health. Yeah. But it's a good analogy for what you just said. For me, challenging yourself to be better every single time is the way to keep improving yourself. The podcast is the same thing.
Yeah.
230 episodes later, here you are. But I never thought it would happen on the first episode. But when I was doing first, second, third, I was like, okay, how can I make it better? And it's 200 iterations while people were waiting to make their perfect episode. And they still have zero.
Done is better than perfect.
It is. So while we were talking about religion and the soul, there's another story from the inside track that comes to my mind. You entering a situation where you talk, you're in a heated argument about religion in Pentonville. Mm-hmm. So, and the heated argument about religion is trying not to get the other people in defensive, because how are we learn to cope with this? We enter and say, no, you're wrong. Let me tell you how it's done and how life is. What you didn't do, you basically started with a question. Aren't all religions based on the same values, being friendly to one another, helping one another? So can you tell me, can you share the story with our listeners?
Sure.
For the ones that have not read or listened to the inside track, here it is. Let me show it to you. It also goes
available in Bulgarian.
Also available in Bulgarian. Also in audiobook in Bulgarian. So can you please explain this?
I'll probably give a little bit of context for the readers as well as to why I was there. Pentonville is the most violent, statistically the most violent prison in England, and I found myself there serving a 6-month sentence as the only non-criminal. Never been arrested, never been accused of a crime, never been found guilty, still don't have a criminal record. And that came about by arguing a business deal in court with a much bigger, a more, how can I put it, profitable company that had far better and more expensive lawyers. And yes, I'm sure my ego played a part as well, but I was found in contempt of court and ended up serving a 6-month sentence, unsegregated. I was with all the criminal prisoners in, again, the most violent prison in the UK.
What's actually contempt of court?
It means that you're disrespecting the court's orders. And the most common way of that, most common way is if you see somebody in the gallery shouting at the judge, they can put you away for contempt because you're holding the court in contempt.
Disrespectful?
What the other side accused me of is actually breaching a freezing order. They were suing me for $17 million. We'd done multi-millions of dollars business in the past. I felt it was all bullshit, and I was going to prove that. And a lot of my indignation at them through not playing ball was really where my ego came up, because I was seeking to show that what they were doing was just wrong. And before that got to court, well, that never did get to court. Now, I knew that wouldn't, because it was all based on fabrication. But to try to pressure me into a settlement, they put a contempt of court application together, telling the judge that I'd breached a freezing order on one of the assets. And I'm like, I haven't done that. And I look at their argument, and it was clever, it was intelligent, it was well structured, but completely distorted context to try to manipulate the argument. And so I thought, no judge is going to even entertain that for more than 5 minutes. And I found out a lot about how the court system worked. and as a result, yeah, I ended up going and serving 6 months. I lost my business, I lost my relationship, I lost pretty much everything. And as a result, I went in, but I went in as a secret agent of change. Again, I've been teaching positive psychology for many years, and I thought, well, if this is going to happen, you can't change what has already happened. That's stupid. That's futile. Yeah, resistance to what is the biggest cause of misery for most people, because they're trying to resist something that's already happened. Hey, if the milk is spilled, the milk is spilled. Complaining about your carpet isn't going to clean the carpet. So I went in and saw it as an amazing adventure, as an opportunity to go add value and change lives to people who would never normally get to see my work. And so, as a result of that, I ended up, changing a lot of lives and getting a lot of the prisoners off drugs and stopping suicides and changing the intake system to essentially reduce violence that's now being used in prisons all over the world. I won a national award while I was in there for the work that I did. It was an amazing, inspiring adventure. But while I was there, I saw myself as a great opportunity, as a secret agent of change. And while I was walking through the wing one time, where they let us out for 45 minutes a day, I saw 3 guys that looked like they were having this real aggressive tension. And bearing in mind, I think 3 deaths in 1 week was the worst week I was there. Attempted murders pretty much every month, blood on the floor pretty much every day. I mean, it's a pretty tough place. And I was walking through, and I noticed these 3 guys, and they were arguing, and it looked like it could kick off. It looked like it could turn violent, and everybody's got a weapon of some sort, whether it's a sharpened toothbrush or whether it's a razor blade glued or whatever it may be. And I thought, oh, great opportunity to sort of quietly pass by and kind of do an assessment and see if there's something I can help with. And that's when I listened in, and they were arguing about religion. There was a Muslim there saying why everybody's blaming Islam and terrorists, and they've just got it wrong, and it's the media trying to stir things up. And the other guy saying, well, Christianity is the only true religion because blah, blah, blah. And there's another guy saying that, God's bullshit, and it's basically religion's the biggest cause of war on the planet. And you could see these guys kind of not backing down. And that's only got one direction. That's escalation. And at that point, I thought, here's a great opportunity to step in. So when you're approaching conflict, bearing in mind a lot of that in a situation like prison is driven by the need for significance. It's driven by the need for you to be right, and it's a zero-sum game, which means for you to be right, somebody else has to be wrong. Ego. Yeah, all ego. And especially in a place like that where a lack of healthy ego usually is punished by domination, bullying, extortion, etc. It's literally law of the jungle a lot of the time in there. And so to get invited into that conversation is the first step. To then try to maintain everybody's illusion of significance without seeing as I'm muscling in is something that had to happen after that. Then to kind of hijack the conversation in a subtle way and recontextualize it in a way that pulled the legs from under the violent aspects of the argument, and then hopefully allow them to retain the illusion of control that it's okay without it all kicking off. And that was kind of my mission. And so I walked up and I essentially needed to break the pattern because the energy was building. So I needed to break that cycle. If that energy was continued to build, it wasn't long before it would explode. So asking an innocuous question, an innocent question, by essentially inviting them to, you're asking them something they want to answer. So I says, oh, excuse me, guys, do you know if we're getting any exercise today? Because exercise would normally follow after the being let out. But it didn't always happen because it was winter. It was raining a lot in England. If it's raining, then the guards didn't want to get wet, so we got exercise cancelled. And you could see it kind of stopped them mid-flow. And and now they're having to shift gears mentally to access a different part of their brain to go, and so they're coming out of the argument to move into a different energy. Because I wasn't the threat. I was actually, being polite. Oh, excuse me, guys. Do you mind? Does anyone know if we're having exercise today? It wasn't. The energy was perfectly placed. And and one says, I really hope so, because it's been cancelled for the last 3 times. They treat us like animals in here. And of course, then the other 2 chimed in as an agreement frame. Yeah, I know. It pisses me off. Blah, 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 blah. And now they're agreeing with each other, not disagreeing with each other.
Rapport.
Well, at least it's dropped the tension down to kind of neutral, so they're not arguing with each other now. They've found agreement. And then one of them, that was kind of the ringleader, goes on to say why, yeah, they're treating us like animals. This is BS and blah, blah. And I'm letting it, I'm assessing everything. At this point, I'm looking for micro movements, pupil dilation. Are they on drugs? Who's the aggressive body language? Who is essentially trying to establish themselves in the pecking order? What's the breathing pattern? There's so much information that's available. What's the energetic dynamics? What are the language patterns that are then leading to either dominance or neutrality? And so I'm watching all of this and I'm maintaining a neutral stance. And I invite myself in with another question. What are you guys talking about, if you don't mind me asking? Oh, well, yeah, I was talking about how most people don't get Islam because it's misrepresented in the media and blah, 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 blah. And the guy's name was Azim, really good guy, actually. And he starts off on his rant. Now, the thing with when somebody's ranting is that you need to allow them enough time to feel that they've been heard, because if you cut them off too soon, they will simply discount anything you say because they think you don't understand because you haven't heard. But if you let them get too far into their rant, then they become more addicted to being right about why everybody else is wrong. So there's a fine call, and he got into it just at the point where I felt he was going to then start a comparison frame against the other religions, but I'd then heard enough to justify. And of course I come and say, hey, yeah, I totally agree with you, because you can't kick back against that. But one thing I've always found fascinating, of course, now they're intrigued. And this is elegant, it's flow, I'm not bitchy about it. So I say, I completely agree with you. And again, I'm nodding my head, there's an agreement frame. But one thing I've always found fascinating, of course, then three heads turn towards me, is that all of the spiritual masters that led all of the different religions essentially taught the same thing. They taught about unconditional love through linked to ritual by going through forgiveness and understanding how to become a better version of yourself, not by trying to compare yourself, but by working on yourself. And essentially, they all had the same kind of way of saying the same thing, kind of like how, and now I use because the brain works in metaphors by comparing. We make something hot or cold compared to something that's warmer or colder. So it's kind of like how school teachers in school are all teaching, all maths teachers teach the same syllabus, but they have their different ways of actually teaching it. Everyone's got their quirks, their ways of doing it. Now, if someone was smart enough to study religion and be on a journey of personal growth, now what am I doing? I'm acknowledging that to be on a path of growth is significant. But then I'm going to link insignificance to the continuation of the argument. So I'm not telling them they're dumb. They're basically having to admit that they are dumb if they keep arguing. And because significance is driving the pattern, you link insignificance to the continuation of it. They'll talk themselves out of the argument. So I says, if somebody's smart enough or advanced enough to want to study spiritual text and religious to work on themselves, I'm sure that kind of person wouldn't be dumb enough to argue over who's got the best teacher in school. In fact, if they think their teacher is the best, surely they should be grateful that they've got the best teacher and almost feel sorry for the other people that don't have the best teacher, even though they're essentially teaching the same thing. Boom. Yeah. Go argue with that one.
Yeah, this it's similar technique that I think the podcast uses while impacting the listeners and the viewers' lives through the personal story. The personal story is an analog, it's a metaphor to compare yourself towards the story and fit yourself in. It's like a movie. You're watching the movie has a script, and you feel like you are the main character in it. And you're like, okay, he does that, and yeah, I've done that in a similar situation. The mind is a very powerful tool, but when you're not giving people advices, like you just described now, you didn't enter the conversation to say, guys, let me tell you how it is and let me give you advice how to solve this. You basically share the story, a viewpoint.
I'd have got a toothbrush sticking out of my neck. And for guys, this is a big one for gentlemen, essentially. When we go home at night, we go to our loved one, and our loved one gives us a sharing their day. women love to be able to unload by sharing. That's why you put 3 women together and they're going to find stuff to talk about. You put 3 guys in a room and we're kind of dumb, all right? Yeah, so, and I'm not using stereotypical gender here because masculine energy and feminine energy is really what I'm talking about. You can have naturally effeminate men and naturally masculine women. So, but I'm using this as a way for people to understand that if a guy walks home and their woman wants to be understood, they don't want to be fixed. And if a guy walks in and says, well, hey, what you should do is, let me tell you the first rule of coaching. Unsolicited coaching will always trigger pushback because of what I mentioned earlier about the primary fear that we're not enough. So we all have that somewhere deep inside. So if I turn around to you and say, you tell me a problem, I say, hey, I know how to fix that. What you should do is, at that point, the presupposition, the originating thought is essentially, the context behind that is essentially, you're not good enough right now where you're at. And in order for you to get better, then you need to do this. Now, what'll happen is the brain may even listen intellectually to what you're going to say, but you will not own that information at an emotional level because the cost of that awareness is the responsibility to acknowledge that you're not good enough. And so most people will listen and completely ignore the advice.
It's the same as school. When you have the wrong answer, it's a wrong answer, and someone picks it, raises their hands, and this is incorrect. This is the correct way of saying it. So the school basically teaches us that.
Absolutely. And if somebody's put their hand up and got shot down in flames, they're going to think twice about putting their hand up again.
This happened to me as well.
It's common pattern.
Writing I've never thought I'm good in writing, and it's due to a similar response by a teacher.
You can normally find people's limitations linked to one specific area of emotional pain. I talk about people that say they can't sing. And I say, who here can sing? And some people put their hand up. Who here knows they can't sing? Who here definitely knows they can't sing? And some people, definitely me. I'm like, I've got news for you. Everybody can sing. Saying a human being can't sing is like saying a dog cannot bark. We all have the ability. Now, you don't have, not everyone's going to be Celine Dion, but everybody can sing. And for those that raise their hands, I can normally ask them the question, what was the moment you decided you couldn't sing? And every single time they will say, they sometimes have to look a little further back, but is when I was auditioned for the choir and the teacher said, who strangled the cat? Or it was when I was singing in the shower and my sister says, oh God, you sound awful, or whatever it may be. There was an emotional trigger that triggered the fear I'm not enough, and I will never put myself in a position where I'm vulnerable enough for that again, so I will just adopt an identity of saying I can't sing. The mind will justify, and I now have an identity that'll limit me for the rest of my life. And you can say that about, I'm no good at pub quizzes, because my teacher said I was no good at general knowledge. I'm no good at business because I had an idea that I was excited about, and my dad says, that'll never work, you dummy. And now, I've limited myself on being able to express ideas because I fear that somebody will judge me. And one of the biggest challenges I see in the limitation of people, you really want to become superhuman? Then understand that most people's lives have been limited not by their ability. We have so much more ability inside of us than we will ever give ourselves credit for. But because we have avoided situations and circumstances that we have voted on could lead to a higher likelihood of experiencing the emotional pain of not being enough in the eyes of others, usually the ones we most care about. And that has been true through 30 years of studying human behavior. You can nearly always trace back people's story about why they're not good enough or why they can't fill in the blank, down to the avoidance of or the lack of where they got love as a child from the people they most wanted it from, and where they felt pain and wanted to avoid that for the rest of their life.
Unconditional love. Because at most times it comes as with conditions. You do your homework, you do your homework, have high grades, and I can relate to that a lot.
Every one of us can. Why? Because we don't have references for unconditional love. The spiritual master known as Jesus was teaching self-actualization through unconditional love. That's the pathway to heaven. The Buddha was teaching it through self-enlightenment. But if you look at the references that mum and dad had, they're just us a little bit older. Their kids didn't come with an owner's manual. Their parents never had an owner's manual for them. They're just trying to project their own model of the world to try to deal with their own stuff. But in our mind, mum and dad had to be perfect, and therefore we blame our parents for, again, pretty much everything about our past. But there's no reference. Unconditional love sounds great, but most people aren't born enlightened, i.e. everyone. Buddha wasn't born enlightened. He was born Prince Siddhartha. We're on our own journey. And if your first earliest memory, 5 years old, 6 years old, maybe, well, from the age of 0 to 18 months, you do get unconditional love. Why? Because nobody blames the baby for screaming at 2 a.m. And babies are completely egocentric. They wake up and they're like, oh, I'm really hungry. Mum and dad had a tough night last night. I'm going to wait till 7 o'clock. No, they're going to scream their head off, and you're going to go and do it. Now, it may be inconvenient, but you don't blame the baby. It's what babies do. Dogs chase cats. That's what dogs do. You don't blame the dog for chasing a cat. It's part of the game. But at 2 years old, or thereabouts, there's a switch. All of a sudden, there is some level of interaction, some understanding, some two-way communication now. And you've heard of what we call the terrible twos, where the tantrums start. Well, the tantrum with the 2-year-old is easy when you understand it. They've had their entire life up to that point being the center of attention, and everybody runs around them. And now they're no longer the center of attention, but they still want to be. But now mummy says no. Well, I don't know. I've never heard no. You don't say no when the child's 6 months old and wants feeding at 2 a.m. So from the age of 2 years old or thereabouts, we enter a new model whereby if we do what we're told to do, then the perception of the child is that love is given, and the perception of the child is that if they don't do what mummy or daddy want, then that love is withdrawn. Now, it's not actually withdrawn. The parents still love the child, but in the world of the child, perception is reality. And if they don't get the love, connection, approval, praise, validation that they get when they do what's right, they've grown up. By the time you have your earliest memory, you've got 3 or 4 years of being trained that love is conditional. And then we spend the rest of our life projecting that into our own relationships and wonder why Disney is nothing more than a concept.
I have a story of someone that was on my podcast 2 years ago. Her name is Eva Boneva. She's working with kids, unprivileged kids. And she told me a story about entering a facility for kids that were left behind. And there was a room with around 150, 180 babies, none of which was crying. Babies. Because they, it's hard illustration, but actually, can you imagine that the babies that when they cry, no one goes there to feed them or to pay any attention or hug them or whatever. They learn that this is not the way that people will come to provide food or water or whatever. They're just because it's hard for people to imagine not feeding your baby. And this is what will happen if the baby cries once, twice, 10 times, 100 times, and then it knows I don't have to cry, no one will come. It's extremely powerful concept to know that attention for kids is vital to grow loving 100%. And accepted. And because it's hard to people to think about what you just said and not imagine the other part of the spectrum where the kids are left absolutely unattended. For one reason or another, not blaming anyone there. But
you'll have what's called failure to thrive syndrome. The psychological consequences on the other side of that are usually pretty lasting and terrible. And yes, there is no right or wrong answer. We're all still trying to figure it out. We're all trying to put one foot in front of the other, just like mum and dad did, as best we can and learn along the way. We're going to fall down. We're going to scrape our knee. We're going to get up. We're going to try to make better decisions is really the direction of travel rather than trying to arrive at some unattainable place of perfection.
There's one quote by Napoleon Hill that you used on the book, and also I watched it on your TEDx talk in Klagenfurt in Germany. It's every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. So can we briefly go through the story of like the stronger trees? Because for me, Bulgaria is a place where hard times developed strong people, and I really want to like link the conversation with our present conditions. You know,
Understood.
Eastern Europe, it's hard politically, like in every direction. It's hard for people to grow, but yet we have such a big benefit from going through different political like reforms.
Yeah,
and it's hard, but this makes us more like hustling and strong and willful.
Absolutely. Again, the quote you're referring to is that the strongest trees don't grow in the best soil; they grow in the strongest winds. And when I look at a country like Bulgaria and I see the history, and I notice that not only has the psychological muscle been built, but you guys have huge hearts. You have a lot of understanding and compassion that can only come from people that have been through hardship. There's so many people that have been grown up in Western societies that haven't had any of the challenges. And again, let's go back to the kids. There's been so many social studies that in the 70s, they tried to raise a bunch of kids without having any challenges. They essentially put them in bubble wrap. Turned out to be the most dysfunctional people in society. But if you realize that, as I said there, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. When you know that you are an athlete in the gym, you are focused on the non-physical part of you that relates and responds to challenge. You either rise above to the challenge or you get crushed by it. If you're identifying with a comfort zone mentality, you will be crushed. Well, you guys haven't had much opportunity to identify with a comfort zone mentality, which is what gives you the strength of mind. It's what gives you the ability to tolerate's probably the wrong word, but live within a system that is clearly dysfunctional politically, that's clearly imperfect, and make the best of it no matter what, because you have that level of reference. It's like, hey, we didn't get it easy. Right? Go to the athlete. Most people in today's world are looking at life through the concept or the lens of the muscle fiber, which means that when you're lifting that weight on the bar and you're at that burning rep, what is the muscle fiber doing? It's sending messages to the brain. Stop. What are you doing? I'm being broken down. This burns. Help. Yeah, dummy. But what does the athlete do? They're proud that they can bust out another 2 reps and not lift their arms for another 2 hours. Why? They feel proud at getting a personal best. They feel proud that they have the discipline to be able to do that. And what is going to get this country out of the current situation, what's going to help this world get out of the current situation, is people who have the ability to face adversity with discipline, not cowardice. People who have the courage to say, hey, I've been there before. We can handle that. You guys handled how many years of communism?
Oh,
right?
50, 45.
Are you kidding me? Right? And all you're facing now is X, Y, or Z. It's like, the contrast frame that you guys have is priceless. I go to my businesses, and have I had failures? Hell yes. Some spectacular multi-million-dollar failures. But my failures are my capital. Some people use their failures as justification why they're not good enough and they shouldn't start another business. I'm like, are you kidding me? I just bought millions of dollars worth of lessons. Why would I put them on the shelf and never use them? My failure is my capital. You turn your adversity into your strength. You turn what other people see as a weakness into a superpower. And from that place, you become unstoppable. You become superhuman. It's like, guys, are you kidding me? You're complaining about that? When I ran the Marathon des Sables, which is an ultra marathon across the Sahara Desert, several hundred kilometers in the toughest terrain on earth. And after I ran that, the contrast frame, I said, I've got to go run a marathon. And I'm thinking, and? It's like, no, I'm using it as a contrast frame for myself. The bank puts up interest rates on a multi-million-dollar loan that I didn't see coming. Hang on a minute. If I can go run across the desert in 50-degree heat, in carrying 20 kilos on my back, running a marathon a day, back-to-back for 7 days, with day 4 being a double marathon at 84 kilometers, I'm sure I can handle a little interest rate rise. Come on. And for you guys, it's like you have such a well to draw from, a deep well, a reservoir of the human soul, that you have been down there. You come up and say, hang on a minute. If we can go in lockdown for a little while, we just did 50 years of communism, right? You can't handle somebody saying you can't come out because of some supposedly scary bug. Give me a freaking break, right? I'm surprised you guys don't think, hang on, if anything's stupid enough to have a go at our immune system, it'll find out how tough we really are. Right, that's the kind of attitude. And you go to the more of the Western world, namby-pamby nations that have never had that level of challenge, and everybody's hiding in their homes with masks and being worried and fearful. And I see you guys walking out on the streets, almost saying, "Bring it on."
Yeah, it's a thin line there. Some people have really Bulgarian's health system is not very stable. Yes, of course, the adaptability and the thing that people did and worked on. We're the last place in physical activity in Europe, first place in cardiac diseases. We are very bad demographically, but now this pandemic is saying, okay guys, you need to be physically active, and we are doing it. But also it says that it's no joke, and people that feel that they're have problems, like my dad, for example, had a cardiac arrest. He's a teacher and he stays at home until he got vaccinated. Now he's happy, but still for me, it is a thin line there, because people are unaware of their bodies because they have not looked into themselves. They have not taken care of their bodies because they have taken care of their work and etc. families, which is their own choice, of course, no blaming there. I want to talk about this person that you met in this specific marathon, the Korean guy that was blind. Can you tell us about this? Because there's always something arriving when you are thinking, okay, I cannot go anymore. I've listened to David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. He ran with his metatarsals was broken. I've read a lot of stories. I've let your fellow Brit, Ross Edgley, who swam across Great Britain. Amazing book, really. I was so inspired, all like stoicism in it, health, and going for a swim, being ripped and really, really strong with thick bones, and people saying you're not a swimmer, like you cannot sing. Can you tell us how these moments of seeing someone doing it that we thought, okay, let's quit, like motivates us? So because this is a good way of comparison. If he can do it, I can do it too.
100%. And yeah, that was a powerful moment for me. And I mentioned that on one of the days in the Marathon des Sables, it's the double marathon day. It's day 4. And it's the feared day. Everybody's mindful of day 4. It's looming, and then it's upon you. And bearing in mind, again, you've got to run 84 kilometers that day, having already ran about 150 kilometers. And you're in 50 plus degrees Celsius heat, 130 odd Fahrenheit. You are carrying 20 odd kilos on your back, all of your food, your equipment, your sleeping bag, your everything. And I set off on the day of the double marathon in a really poor state. I'd actually got food poisoning. I'd not hydrated my food the night before because water's rationed. That's a big part of it. You get 9 liters a day. That's for washing, cooking, hydrating. Once it's gone, it's gone. And running 42 kilometers a day in 50-degree heat. So it's a bit of a chess game. Do you wash your hands after you go to the bathroom and use precious water, but not risk getting diarrhea? Or do you not wash your hands and end up with something like diarrhea and then dehydrate that way? I mean, it's a chess game. It's not just fitness. As again, David Goggins' great example, and it's you need to callous your mind when it comes to things like making strategic decisions where you're not listening to the comfort zone side of life, but you're pushing forward with the growth side of life. And so I thought I was ready until I woke up at 4 a.m. with food poisoning and my stomach gurgling and feeling really bad, deathly sick. I crawled out of my sleeping bag and I pretty much threw up out of both ends. And I felt awful. I had got no strength. I was in one of the lowest places physically. I was beat up. Most parts of my body was either sore, battered, bruised, blistered, or bleeding. And now I had this chronic food poisoning stomach bug that just made me feel like I couldn't even get up. And I've got to go run 84 kilometers that day. I mean, that's where you need to ask better questions. And I put my rucksack on, or my friend actually lifted it up. and I got my rucksack on. I got myself together, and at 8 o'clock that morning, the gun went off at the start line for that day's phase. And all the people started running, and I couldn't. I tried, I couldn't. I trudged through the sand. I was trying to pick my feet up. Now, the challenge with that is 10 minutes after the gun goes off, you have 2 camels that start walking with 2 Berbers on, which is essentially the back marker. Now, if the camels catch you up and overtake you, you're out of the race.
For good.
Yeah, that's it. You're taken out because seriously, something's wrong. So you got to beat the camels. And I kept looking over my shoulder. I kept seeing these camels. I was trying to push myself and motivate myself. Anyway, I'm like, come on, Sage, get a grip. Have a word with yourself. I can do this. I'm trying to pull every motivational trick out of the bag. I'm visualizing my rucksack filled with helium balloons. I'm talking every positive trick in the book I know how to motivate myself with. And I'm staying ahead of the camels. And I remember I'd ran best part of 30 miles, 50 kilometers that day, and the sun was starting to set. And it was starting to drop the temperature fast. In the desert, it goes cold quickly. All the heat evaporates. There's no clouds to keep it in. And you can get to freezing at night. Now, I have to keep running now just to stay warm. And I'm walking, I'm running, I'm walking around, trying to get a time. And the sun's going down. It's just about to set, and there's nothing left. I haven't eaten for over 24 hours because I couldn't stomach anything. My body is depleted. I've got no glycogen. My salt balance is out. I'm starting to hallucinate and see double. It's like, it was really, I knew that if I carried on, I was going to be in trouble. And I basically quit. I sat down on a rock and I thought, that's it, I'm done. And I was going to there's a rocket flare you fire, like what we call a shimulia. And a signal flare. And everybody hates it because it like weighs 2 pounds and you've got to carry the damn thing. But I'd always bury it at the bottom of my rucksack every day because I thought it's always easier to take one more step than it would be to stop and unpack. And that was my justification, trying to set me up to win. But in my mind's eye right now, this thing was right at the top of the rucksack. And I sat down, I opened the rucksack and I was going to get the flare. And at that moment, I heard something. I was on my own. All the runners predominantly just gone miles ahead. Still couldn't see any camels, which was a good sign. But I thought, I'm just going to wait till they come. And I heard this trudging, this like shifting in the sand. I thought, what is that? And I looked up and I saw these 2 silhouettes against the sunset. And they were getting closer and I watched and I saw them go by. And it was a blind old Korean guy in his late 60s. And I knew he was blind. He had his dark glass. He was tied at the wrist to his guide. And I thought, whoa, he was a competitor. He had a number on. His guide had a number on. And I watched these in dumbfound silence, like just watching them, these 2 people go by. And I'm like, wow, hang on a minute. It wasn't a mirage, right? What makes somebody who's clearly not an athlete, this guy's in his late 60s, he's a pensioner, want to run the toughest foot race in the world where he can't even see where to place his feet? I mean, what would motivate, inspire somebody to do that? I'm a student of human behavior. I want to know. But to know, I've got to find out. To find out, I've got to catch him. So I thought, come on, that's my curiosity overrode my sense of fatigue. And I got up and I ran after them, and I found out through his translator, who was also his guide, that every single year he ran this race. Why? Because a few years before, his brother was dying of cancer. And as he was dying and he eventually passed away, the hospice that looked after him was so amazing that every year his brother ran this race to raise money for the hospice that had looked after his dying brother. And I thought, whoa, if there was ever a reminder that I needed, that power comes to those in direct proportion to their willingness to serve, quote I learned from Toni Робинс, that, wow, I've made this race all about me. It's all about, am I good enough to do it? I want to prove to the world that I'm good enough to do it. I want to be able to brag to some girl in a bar that I ran the marathon this hour, some bullshit. And it was all about me and my insecurities, my ego, my significance. What am I really doing? Could I use this race or even this time one day in the future, maybe even on a podcast in Bulgaria, who knows, to inspire other people? And then it didn't become about me anymore. It became, how can I use this to help others? And I found a different level of energy. See, energy doesn't come from calories. That's physical energy. That's always going to run out. Energy is the product of passionate interest. Energy comes from being on purpose with something. You can be crawling over the sand dune about to quit and see the oasis on the other side and suddenly get invigorated. You can be at home having exhausted yourself after a hard tennis match or a hard day at work, and you just want to crawl into bed and pull your snuggies over your head and go to sleep and just quit on the day. And then the phone rings and you forgot to turn it off. Anyway, you look at it. Oh, it's a girl you haven't heard from for a while that happens to be in town. Hello. Or it's an emergency from a loved one. Where did that energy just come from? You didn't just have a Red Bull at the side of the bed. Right? Boom. Energy is the product of passionate interest. And this guy inspired me. Seeing this guy trudge through the desert, not being able to see where to put his feet, not being in a physical condition that I'd been training for months or some people for years for this race for. As a pensioner and just doing it because the reason he was doing it was bigger than him. And boom, he inspired me. I finished the race. I ran in at 7 o'clock the next morning. In fact, I ran the last mile out of the 52 miles, the last kilometer and a half out of the 84 kilometers. I finished that in under 7 minutes. I sprinted. In fact, there's a clip of me on Eurosport actually finishing the stage of the double marathon. And I was ecstatic. And I got up next day and I ran the next marathon. And I got up the last day and I finished that race. And to this day, I probably never see that guy again. But what was interesting is that a couple of years later, I told that story when I was speaking in Japan. And the Japanese are crazy bunch. I love them to bits. But they're crazy. And I inspired a whole bunch of people out of the audience to go run the Marathon des Sables for whatever reason. And they sent me a picture a year later of them with their arms around the blind Korean guy, telling him the story about how he had inspired them to run the race through the story that I told them about how he had inspired me. Talk about full circle. And yeah, it's always about doing it for others. You look at anyone running a marathon for the first time, not your professional athletes, your Gogginses of the world, but those running for the first time, way more finished that are running for a cause, a charity, a fallen loved one, a cause that they believe in, than they are running to try to brag in a bar or to tick it off a goal list that they've always wanted to run a marathon. What's life trying to teach us? Yes, we can grow, but why are we growing? To put a trophy on the table or to put a smile on somebody else's face because we're giving more of who we are to them? You don't need to say anymore.
Yeah. There it goes. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, isn't it?
Mm.
It's an amazing book. It's a gift from my brother, and I read it. I remember reading it in Hamburg. I was even carrying it with me, and this book is so powerful, really. And all the references that you do to it, like all the references you placed in inside track for it. This is the book that you mentioned there now and now again. And for me, it's a huge miss for people that have not read it yet. And I would plea that you guys read this book or listen to it, but better read it because it's not a book as a book. It's something more. Nietzsche has a quote. In Bulgaria, it's Nietzsche has a quote. The bigger the why, the easier the how. So you need to have a bigger why. And listening to the story about the Korean guy, I just go back to myself and saying, okay, I've never started this because of myself. I just wanted to share the conversations that I had with others to inspire them because they might not have the ability. You are now in Sofia. So people say that Sofia is not Bulgaria. There are people in small villages around Bulgaria that don't have any people like you or Dimo or myself to talk to. And Jim Rohn has a quote: "You're the average of the 5 people you spend most time with." And I like to imagine that these people are listening to the podcast and feeling that we are one of the people that they're talking to on a regular basis, every day or every other day. It doesn't matter, once a week. But we are there to give them different perspective, and this is extremely important for me. This personal example of I'm doing this not for myself. I'm doing it because it matters to others and because I'm helpful to others. It's about giving. Have you read Adam Grant's Give and Take?
No, I know the book because a lot of my students have read it, but no, I haven't actually read it myself.
It's a book that highlights how much giving is important. Absolutely identical to what you did in Pentonville. Like going in to give something, not to like previous to reading the book in Bulgarian, because the first time I've listened to it in Bulgarian, I didn't know a lot about your story, but the way that you approached being in behind bars, it's amazing. It's like this attitude towards I'm into a mission, like you said in the Klagenfurt speech. There's something that is sending me there to do something good. It's so inspiring for me. Like tell me what, like how do you decide to write the letters, and what went through your mind, like realizing that you made a mistake and you're going there? Because contempt of court, I don't think it's intentional. It goes because you didn't expect it to happen, but it's hard position. You're like, I don't even know how to form my question because I try to put myself in your shoes and thinking what will happen with me if someone tells me that tomorrow I'm going into Sophia's prison, for example, or even not for a crime, but going there, living, like changing my environment to be there with violent people, and take me through it.
One of the things that I've always understood is that, again, life is a growth-centric experience, not a comfort-centric experience. And one of the first things I wrote in my first letter to my students was that life has what I call graduation events. You know, we are in what I call Earth School, and we are going to get tested. Now, you can have your basic life tests, which we get, pretty much on a daily, weekly basis, but occasionally at the end of the school year, you have a graduation event. You have an exam. And that's really designed to see, can you walk your talk, or do you just talk a good talk? And I got off pretty lightly. At the end of the day, I got a test that allowed me to play my strengths, which usually they do. I got to go in and use 25 years of personal growth, working 15 years with Toni Робинс as an intervention specialist and trainer, to go and help people that wouldn't normally get help. I didn't make it about me. It wasn't my sob story. I'll tell you, listeners, right now, if they haven't figured it out yet, 80% of people don't care about your problems. The other 20% are glad you have them. So if you're relying on a victim story to get connection, then I'm sorry, but life is going to continue to give you more evidence of why you're a victim. So this I saw immediately as a graduation event. Now, we don't get to choose when we get the surprise exam. That's part of the game. But I also know that a lot of people have their own graduation events. For some, it's losing a loved one. For others, it's getting a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. For others, it's becoming disabled, for example, or losing a limb. We have our own graduation events. It's how we deal with them that counts, not about anybody else. And you can choose to be a victim, or you can choose to, say, rise and take it on. Now, at the time, I was pretty much top of my game in terms of I had 53 staff in my company. We were doing multiple, 6 figures a month in revenue. We were helping thousands of people. I'd got my wedding scheduled for Portofino in Italy. 70,000-80,000 euro wedding, all paid for. I'd got so many different things, a million moving parts, all of which came crashing down with one judgment from a judge, which I wasn't expecting. Turned around and said, boom, find you in contempt. And I was going away. I lost everything. I went from 53 staff to 3 staff in like a matter of days. And I was saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal debt. And I came out after 6 months, $350,000 in the hole with no business, no credit rating, no nothing. Now, you can't afford to worry about stuff like that. And the only thing I focused when I came out was how do I had 150 people that had just bought tickets to my seminars that got cancelled. And the only thing I thought about when I came out was not how do I get money back? How do I build my life back? And it's only 4 years ago. No, the first thing that when I came out is, okay, how do I honor the commitments that I'd made to the people, even though all the money's gone, been spent, like I came out, I never went bankrupt, but I was starting from minus $300,000. It's a pretty decent hole to dig yourself out of. And I saw that as, wow, what an exciting challenge. I mean, it can't get any worse, right? And yeah, I know how to make money. Let's go play. But let's put the focus on how do I serve the people who trusted me before I went in, that then got the events cancelled, and it took me 1.5 years to do that. And out of 150 people, we ended up giving 2 refunds. And I honored the tickets on everybody else to put together. And for me, going in at that time, again, you come back to where we started this conversation. Ask better questions. See, most people go and say, oh, why did this happen to me? Well, your brain's trained to find an answer. Well, because you're a schmuck, because you're unlucky, because you're not good enough, because your parents said that you'd never amount to anything, because your business partner is a crook and cheated on you. Whatever it is, the brain will find an answer. So ask questions that set you up to win. Questions like, how do I turn this to my advantage? The brain will start searching. That's what its job is. It's like a faithful dog to chase after a stick. Well, throw the stick in the right direction, the brain's going to run after it. What's funny about this I've not noticed yet? Now, you may have to keep asking until the brain digs a little deeper for some people. What can I learn from this? When I work with people who have cancer, you will find that the vast majority of cancers are not caused from a violation of the physical rule set. There's certain aspects to that, but you'll probably see them at 10%. What do I mean by that? Well, if you've worked in asbestos for 20 years, then you've got a higher probability of developing cancer. You've smoked cigarettes for 40 years, you've got a higher probability of developing cancer because you're violating the physical rule set on how the game is set up, which will lead to that level of probability. But the vast majority of people who have cancer have never smoked. They're not working in asbestos. They're not just eating junk food all day in and out. No, the vast majority of cancer, what's it caused by? Well, you can quite easily tell by looking at what is the number one source of remission. And no, I'm not talking chemotherapy or toxic DNA chain terminating crap. What I'm talking about here is that you look at all of the studies that were done on spontaneous remission, instant remission, people that recovered without going into radiotherapy or any of the traditional pharmaceutical crap. And you'll find one common denominator. It's not crystals, it's not meditation, it's not veganism. Everyone had their own preferences on what everything was. It was gratitude. Instead of resisting, fighting, battling cancer, my question to people that have it, my starting point is, when was the last time you didn't sit opposite the chessboard trying to win the game? You came around and sat on the same side of the table and asked it, why are you here? What message are you trying to get my attention with? And virtually every time, again, study the people that have survived, and you'll find it's when they finally forgave their parents for something, when they finally let go of the grudge against their ex-lover, when they finally came to terms with dropping the guilt of fill in the blank. It's the emotional aspect, the psychosomatic aspect, that cancer's there as a way to try to get your attention to say, hey, it's the rumble strip on the side of the freeway. You're off track. You're not meant to be living a life of guilt or retribution or obligation or duty or feeling not good enough or harboring resentments or any of that stuff. Forgiving yourself is usually the first part. But if you really start to understand that, if you can ask better questions, why am I here? What does life want me to do? Rather than what do I want to get from life, what does life want from me? Well, I'm in prison. Can I change that? No. Can I change what's already happened? Of course not. If I resist what I can't change, is that going to lead anywhere other than stress? No. Again, I'm asking better questions. Not like, oh, why me? Oh, what if I'd have done this instead? Well, where's that going to take? That's cancerous self-talk. Because you're trying to fight a dead end. No. What's happened is happened. I'm in prison. I can't do anything about that. I've lost my business. I've lost my reputation. I've lost my money. I've lost everything. Well, as Gandhi said, nobody can do anything to you emotionally without your permission. No one can take away your dignity. You can only give it away. So at that point, I'm like, well, I'm clearly here for a reason. What could that reason be? Well, I have a very limited skill set. I'm not good at many things. School being one of them, as we've established. But I do have a skill set that I've spent some time developing on how to help other people and understand human behavior. If I can bring a light into the darkest place here in the prison, wow, I mean, life, God, whatever label you want to put on it, I'm not interested in debating labels at that level. In fact, the travesty of humanity is that we go to war and kill each other over whose label for the intelligence we don't understand is right. So if God, the universe, the quantum field, the divine, whatever, pick a label, found the only way in English law to smuggle me into prison without ever being accused of a crime, allow me to go to work to do what I do, and then smuggle me out again without even having a criminal record. Wow. I was in tears of gratitude at the genius of the plan.
There's the things that are really special. The gratitude list that you had kept in Pentonville. And the second thing that I want to highlight here, and the reason you're here, is probably because Dimo was one of the people that bought a ticket to your event, and later on received an email that you were like willing to do the workshop again and send 2 tickets for him and his brother to come to London and have it with you. So I really like the concept about giving, and the podcast also came after a lot of giving on my end. I just never thought in this way. And right now you are doing together this the events in Bulgaria with Quantum Events. Can you tell us a bit more about what you're doing? How often are you doing it? Now it's pandemic times, but generally last year you had an event. Yep. I have guests on the podcast, and also like people that support the podcast that have been on the event. I've saw like people that are donors of the podcast as well on the event. So can you tell us a bit more? Like, how do you decide to come back so often, and how do you guys work, and what are you willing to give as a knowledge and experience to the people in Bulgaria?
Sure, and thank you for asking. I mean, I remember that when I was putting on the Sage Business School, and Demo and his brother came, and for them that was a part of their dream, and they used what they'd learned to double, triple their business, and they were so inspired that they wanted to give something back. And they approached me and said, listen, we love our country. We want to help Bulgaria. We think that a lot of people will benefit from some of the insights and some of the teachings that you share, because people are struggling. There's not many places in the former Eastern Bloc that have access to this level of information. We have a vision to bring you to Bulgaria. And I'm like, well, the impetus behind what they wanted wasn't like, oh, we want to set up an events company and we want to make money. There was none of that. It was, how do we help our country? How do we serve Bulgarians? How do we inspire people so that they can become better than that? And that resonated. I'm like, I'm coming. Let's figure it out. We will make it happen somehow. And when we did our first event, which was also celebrating the fact that the book was translated into Bulgarian, which was amazing, then I just saw the hearts of the people. I saw the thirst for wanting this kind of information. You've got the want to. A lot of people, it's apathy. There's no desire. Again, if you want something more for somebody else than they want it for themselves, you're wasting your time. And a lot of times we fall into that trap when we're trying to help others, and then we become a martyr to their problems, trying to get them to change when they don't want to change. Guys, cut it loose. And understand, sometimes, a lot of people need to hit their head on the sidewalk in order to learn how to tie their shoelaces. You have no right to take everybody's lesson away.
Yeah, Stephen Covey says this door opens only from the inside.
100%. So when I came and I saw the welcome that I got, the way that the message was received, the ability for people to actually apply what they were teaching, which is amazing, and then hearing the stories of people, how they turn their lives around, and the success, and how people are moving forward, and then getting a lot of different students. And then we were committed to putting an event on last year, and then obviously the pandemic, or whatever you want to call it, hit. And then Demo was still committed. It was trying to find a way. What is a way that we can work within the rules to make it happen, to honor the people that wanted to come to the event? And credit to him and his ingenuity and his persistence and his dedication and desire to want to help and support and serve. We last year, I think, did the only live event, or certainly the first live event since lockdown in Sofia here. And again, it just underscored my commitment to wanting to help the people that want to be helped. And that's not saying that they're helpless. That's not saying that they're not resourceful, but again, they've got the want to, and that's the most important part. I'm happy to bring the how to, but I can't bring the want to, but you guys have it. And just seeing your story and how you built the podcast. So yes, Quantum Events is a reality. I think petersage.bg is the website, and we're planning our next event right now. I'm very excited. We want to make it bigger, better, and really bring the best of what we can to the table to help as many people as we can.
Прекъсвам епизода с последните новини за събитието на Питър Сейдж в България. Според прекрасните хора от Quantum Events, които доведоха Питър Сейдж в студиото на Свръхчовекът на 3 и 4 септември 2021 година в Event Space в малкото НДК ще се проведе двудневно елит менторшип събитие. Лично Питър Сейдж ще говори за това как да учим като гении, как да създаваме богатство в живота си, как да станем господари на емоциите си, какво е автентичност и защо е важна, коя е най-важната връзка в живота на човек и други. Вземи своя билет на petersage.bg с промокод SUPERHUMAN, за да получиш и свръхчовешка отстъпка. Like the podcast also has a mission. I started as a absolutely free of charge for anyone to listen to. And people thought, okay, why don't you do it as a subscription based? Guys, this is me paying forward. Because this is the only way I can do it to reach maximum number of people. Yeah, if you want to support what I'm doing, you can like subscribe on Patreon or do something that supports it, or pay it forward to your friends. This is absolutely sufficient for me, like to pay it forward to the people that never heard of the podcast. But yesterday on my birthday, because yesterday was my birthday, I got a message from one of my Patreon supporters that really shook me to tears. Like the person that didn't have any will to keep living the life that he's living, and he ended up finding the podcast absolutely randomly, miraculously, and this gave him the willingness to keep going, to be proactive, to live his life, to find a purpose, to look for a purpose and then find it. I mean, he has not started businesses, but the way he perceives his life is way different from before, and this is what like really moves me. This is why I'm doing it. And I never thought it would become a business, but now, because you see, I told you we started with an iPad and lav mics. Now we have these microphones. We have the backlighting,
beautiful
LED
studio.
lighting, 3 cameras, help support. We have editor behind the cameras. We have a team of 10 people that are supporting me with their energy. They're like volunteering their time to be able to grow this. We have the podcast website. It's only in Bulgarian, but it was never thought to be like a grandiose worldwide success. It only goes step by step by step by step. And I'm thankful for you for coming to Bulgaria, because people say, hey, Bulgaria is a small market. Why should I go there? You cannot go there without a mission. You cannot go there without the identity to be someone that gives. So thank you very much for this on behalf of the entire population that is open to receiving your knowledge and experience. Because as you said, in Bulgaria we have the same saying, if you're not ready for you cannot help with advices to someone that doesn't need advices and doesn't want them, not looking for them. I have the next question is, it's about the relationships, because the book is really highlighting the way that you're looking into your relationship that goes through a very hard time. You're in prison. And here is another relationship that we built with Dimo, which is based on having the same values and the way that you're building things. I think that people have massive issues about finding their partner. Massive. I found my girl, my fiance, 5.5 years ago, and she's like the key of me unlocking my potential, starting with acceptance. Because every time I had a relationship before that, it was like, okay, I want you to do this, and compromise with your going to football, and compromise with you visiting your friends. And the relationship that I'm in basically was based on acceptance to the other people's freedom, willingness to dance or do Brazilian jiu-jitsu like me and getting injured like every now and then, and not spending Sundays with her, because right now is a Sunday, but it's a working day for the Superhuman podcast, because today we usually film 2 episodes to be able to keep having the quality content, to to be able to edit it, to put it online, to do everything that's web and social media related. This is my working day. It starts 7 a.m. in the morning, ends up around 5 or 6 p.m. And then there goes Simeon behind the camera to edit all the footage. But this is what I'm putting into on the table with my girlfriend. She's fine with it, with my fiance, because we have this communication and acceptance between us. Tell me, please, what's your experience about building lasting relationships and like things that are really important for people to be happy? Because my perception is that people think that they need to be halves and connect to other halves to make a one whole. My view is totally different, but I would like to hear yours first.
The reality is very different for most people as they find out. And yes, inspired by the dramatization of Hollywood and good old Tom Cruise, it's like, you complete me. You're half to my half. Well, no. If you are walking around expecting somebody else to make you happy, if you are walking around hoping somebody else is going to take away your loneliness, I've got news for you. It's not going to happen. You see, loneliness is you not liking you. It's not down to proximity. You can be in a stadium with 100,000 people and still feel lonely. You can be with a partner you don't love and still feel lonely. It's not down to proximity. It's down to a reflection of the relationship you have in the mirror. And if you are walking around looking for somebody else to try to complete you, take away your limitations of loneliness or what have you, or try to fill the gap of joy you don't feel on your own, then that is going to breed immediate insecurity, immediate fear of loss, immediate codependency, and you're going to be compromising your own sense of self around them so that you don't lose them or upset them in case they run away and leave you with that emptiness again. So I think it was Eckhart Tolle that said, when you love yourself, you can never be lonely because you've always got you with you. And that's the starting point of a relationship. Because if you need somebody in your life, you will never be able to love them. I'll say it again. If you need somebody in your life, you will never be able to love them because you will always be needing them, and you cannot love that which you need. Because at some point, if you need them, you're going to be scared of letting them go, and you're going to compromise who you are showing up in that context. You are going to put pressure on them. You're going to judge them for what they do. You're going to have a whole sense of fear-based relationship anchors rather than love-based relationship anchors. And so when it comes to traditional relationships, people have been conditioned largely through historical aspects of how relationships are formed to, how do I put it? Put expectations on people that are unrealistic. Again, what you've discovered with your fiance here, George, is the fact that the first place you get to is acceptance. And unfortunately, a lot of people get in relationships with people saying, well, yeah, I don't like this about them, but don't worry, I'll fix that. I'll change that. They'll come around. I'll be able to, manipulate them in a way that allows them to fit my pictures more. And there's two ways to play the game. There's two ways to play the game of life. The first way is to play the game that the vast majority of people play, which is feel great when. I feel great when I find the right partner. I feel great when my partner does this. I feel great when my partner doesn't do that. I feel great when I have the €1 million. I'll feel great when I have the car that I want. I feel great when I have the body I want. All this kind of stuff. You're chasing the rainbow, trying to find the pot of gold and realize that it's never going to be there. The only game in town is the game of feel great now. Not feel great now as long as, but feel great now. I played the game of feel great now walking into prison. Turned it into my greatest adventure and the most inspiring time I've ever had. I played the game of feel great now. And feel great now doesn't mean to say pretend to be happy. You want the secret of happiness? I can give you that pretty easy. Bonus. Secret of happiness is to think happy thoughts. Because happiness is a byproduct or a consequence of the thoughts that you think that are happy. Don't want to be depressed? Stop thinking depressing thoughts. Oh, sorry, that's too simple. No, I need Prozac. Yeah, the media told me I can't be happy because there's something to be scared about. Well, no, if you want to be happy, use the red button on the remote. It's called the happiness button.
Off.
And off button. And you'll start realizing the world does work rather than what you're being programmed into. They call it programs for a reason on TV. So if you're playing the game of feel great now, who's going to show up as that person? More attractive or less attractive? Clearly more attractive. Oh, now we're in with a shot of attracting somebody where 1 + 1 is 11, not, I'm a half looking for a half to become one. Yeah, you're like two musical instruments. You need to be able to make music on your own that people want to dance to. And then when they come and join the dance with their instrument, you have a symphony. You have a harmony. And at that point, you're not needing that person, so you can own the space for them to be who they are. But if you're walking around in a relationship right now saying, you're responsible for my happiness, and let's address the concept of trust. Trust in most relationships is completely misunderstood because most people are trusting somebody else not to do something that would then dishonor their trust. Well, that's dysfunction waiting to happen. When you can honor the other person, that you have free choice. I don't get to choose what you do because they outlawed slavery several hundred years ago. So the most successful relationships here are based on non-ownership, or at least the awareness and understanding that the illusion of ownership doesn't work. That doesn't mean to say you're going to be disrespectful. That's an expression of your values. And by the way, people that are going to be disrespectful are going to be disrespectful regardless of what rules they have around your sense of ownership. So when you can come from a place of choosing your partner moment by moment, I choose you today because I love you, not because we signed a piece of paper saying that you can't leave me. I choose you today because you inspire me. And I want you to choose me, so therefore I want to become the person that inspires you. Therefore, you don't get complacent. It's not like, now you're in a relationship, I've got you, I can just take my foot off the gas, coast and not care because you can't leave me because now I don't have to work hard to get you because you're in jail. Done. Right? A relationship prison that unfortunately usually breeds resentment and it breeds conflict. And the traditional rules-based relationship tends to take people beautiful together at the start and then build resentment and turn them ugly over time. And that's not me saying that. Go look at any divorce rate or happiness rate or fulfillment rate. So when it comes to relationships, the first relationship you have to have is the best relationship with yourself. And then you become attractive to somebody else
who's happy with himself.
Who's happy with themselves. And then you can hold a space for that person. And by the way, if I'm lucky enough and privileged enough to have somebody else walk alongside me on my mission so that I can walk alongside them on their mission, wow, I will celebrate that. But at some point, guess what? We become different people. So what happens at that point? Do I say, well, if you're now walking a different path to what my truth is, do I tell you can't walk that path? Or do I compromise my path and not walk my truth anymore? Or do we have an honoring, an agreement, a maturity to say that at this point, if it's the right, like I did with my fiance, we got to a point where we knew that it was our truth to walk different paths. We're still best friends. She's having a baby next month, with somebody else. I'm so happy and thrilled for her. But when it comes to saying, no, I signed a piece of paper saying that if you become a different person to who I met and therefore you have a different trajectory, then you're not allowed to live your truth. I'm sorry. Then I don't get that. I don't see anywhere that has its basis in unconditional love, in happiness, in tolerance, in joy, in support of your partner's greatness. No, I see that as being a prison warder, a jailer, and keeping somebody on a leash to stop them from being the person they were born to become.
Own them.
It's total ownership without the label of slavery. So for me, it's about having a mature understanding that every single relationship ends. Everyone. Either one or both of you will die. Or at some point, it will be your truth to walk a different path. Now, knowing that in advance means you can start to train yourself to let go of what you fear to lose so you can honor what you currently have. But if you're walking around on eggshells because you don't want to upset your partner, or if you think, I can't stay because of the kids, that's what I hear a lot.
I can't leave because of the kids.
Can't leave because of the kids. So let me rephrase that, because what I hear is I'm trapped in a loveless, unfulfilling relationship. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the example for my children so that if they get into a loveless relationship, I'm going to show that what they need to do is stay trapped and not have the courage to leave and go for fulfillment of what they deserve. Do you really want to give that message to your kids? Oh, but they'll feel instability if I leave now. Well, you'd much rather that. What would you counsel them if they were coming to you when they were in an unhappy relationship? Honey, we'll find a way. I want you to be happy. And if you can't be happy there, let's find a way to get you happy. That's what you'd say. Not like, oh no, you know something. Yeah, spend another 10 years in abject misery and crying yourself to sleep at night because, until the kids are ready to leave school. No, you're not going to say that. If you're a parent about your kid that you love, you're going to encourage them and inspire them, give them the courage to walk their truth and give them that level of honoring to honor themselves. Some people have been planning their escape for years and still haven't acted upon it, and using the excuse for lack of courage by making it be about somebody else in an altruistic excuse that's just an excuse.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I think that the book that turned my world upside down, thinking that I'm into relationships that I want to be happy in, and I need to be focused on me becoming happy so I can find another person that's happy with who they are. I think it was Bucay's the three questions, Jorge Bucay's 3 questions. And the first one is, who am I? And just found it there like probably 10 years ago. But I've always been pointed by my friends, even my closest friends, saying, hey, Georgi is in another relationship. So he's like, whenever something does not fit his way of things, he just takes his hat and leaves. But in my mind, because I'm a kid of such a marriage that lasted because of the kids for a long time, unhappy marriage. And I said, I don't want this to happen to my kids ever. Yeah. So, it's always context. It's always the context, and people are judging without knowing the context. Next thing, I really want to point out something in the podcast. I always ask about books. We've already recommended Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Would you be able to point out, of course, apart from Inside Track, and any books that you think that will have a positive impact on people's lives?
100%. And again, the books call people when they're ready.
Yes.
And for some people, if they read the Inside Track, it may not resonate. For some people, it'll be the perfect time in their life to basically have their lives changed by the insights that are inside it. I don't have any attachment or addiction to my baby being the best looking baby just because somebody's not in a position where they're ready for that level of baby. But the book that had the most profound impact on me in recent times was definitely Power versus Force. And I read that book the first time many years ago, couldn't get on with it, dismissed it, and re-picked it up about 3 years later. And it blew my mind. It was just incredible. It just made sense. And that gave me an understanding of the fact that everybody comes at life through different looking glasses and a different model of the world. And it's not about biological maturity. We don't get to vote on whether we're biologically mature. We're going to age no matter what. But emotional maturity, spiritual maturity, that's a choice. And most people are quite happy to stay emotional teenagers for most of their life because they don't have the courage to move forward, to embrace the uncertainty, to let go of the need for significance, to risk putting their hand up in class again and being ridiculed, which is the only way past that level of insecurity and inadequacy. And if you hide behind the fact, I'm never going to raise my hand again because my teacher said the answer was stupid, then I know what will happen. You're probably going to go and get every degree you can to put on the wall to validate yourself as not being stupid, only to still feel stupid because you need another degree to really fill that hole because you're never going to fill the hole. No, the only way you can conquer not being stupid is to risk putting your hand up again and giving another answer. The only way you can risk getting to unconditional love is be willing to have your heart broken again by stepping into the vulnerability of a relationship. The only way you can risk becoming a good entrepreneur is by rising from the ashes of your last failure and saying, I'm going to swing the bat again no matter what. And Power versus Force really taught me that it's not about intelligence. There are a lot of smart people that are broke. There are a lot of smart people on antidepressants. It's not about age. Yeah, there's some young success stories. There's some old success stories. There's some young abject failures for the rest of their life. There's some old people that have been failures for their whole life. It's not about age. It's not about intelligence. It's not about experience. It's not about background. It's not about who our parents were, what school we went to, how much money we've got. It's none of that. The primary discerning factor in a person's quality and journey of life is their level of consciousness, as delineated in the book Power versus Force, that gives a framework for trying to understand what most people think is too nebulous to understand. And again, it's just a model. Remember, models are only useful to the extent we realize they're a model. So it's not truth. Again, truth with a capital T. We don't know the damn truth. Be okay with that. Don't try to search for absolutes and then justify your ego by thinking that you're right. So Power versus Force gives a framework of understanding why people do what they do. And you've heard the term, oh, you should be old enough to know better. Well, it turns out that that doesn't have any basis in reality. Well, why are you always angry? Because if you're coming at a place of being at the calibration of anger, because you're Mr. Grumpy because when you were in school and you put your hand up and the teacher said it was a stupid question and the class laughed at you, and as a result of them laughing at you, you got so emotionally uncomfortable that you lashed out and people backed down. And then you linked the restoration of your significance to anger. And guess what? Mr. Angry's born. And 25 years later, your partner, who is long-term suffering around your temper, is making excuses to you. Oh, don't worry, it's just John. He's just got a violent temper. He's just had a bad day. No. The guy's running an emotional pattern of a 6-year-old because he never got over the fact that he's been linking anger to the restoration of significance, and he's not willing to let go and start raising the significance of others rather than craving it for himself. So Power versus Force will give you the ability to understand people, and as soon as we can understand and have context, we can come from far less judgment. As Mother Teresa famously said, as soon as you judge somebody, you lose all ability to influence them or learn from them. And you certainly can't love them.
It's true for me. I can see myself in different situations where I did that. Because we've all walked the path of not knowing these things, and realizing them later on explains a lot of decisions in our lives.
And where do you live and where do you visit? There is a state of consciousness, and we can, depending on where we're at, we can all be angry. We can all be assholes. We can all be loving. We can all be idiots. We've all been everything. But where do you live as opposed to where do you visit? If you use a health example, if you live in the gym, you can visit McDonald's if you really have to, and it's not really going to do much. If you live in McDonald's, you can visit the gym once in a while. It's really not going to do much. So which side of the curve are you on? If you live more in love and you occasionally visit fear, then that's a different life to living in fear and occasionally experiencing love.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. You've mentioned Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich as well. Did you bring any books with you?
Well,
going into Pentonville?
Into Pentonville. No, I wasn't allowed to take any, but I did have books sent in.
Yeah, okay.
And yes, I had several copies of Think and Grow Rich because I was actually trying to stock the library in the prison with inspirational stuff because there wasn't any in it. And I had a lot of copies of Man's Search for Meaning put in, and I would give copies to the prisoners and I would challenge them to read the book. Those that were complaining, those that were having a hard time, those that were in grief or apathy or despair or depression. And I would challenge them to read the book and not cry with tears of happiness and gratitude about being in prison in Pentonville instead of Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Think and Grow Rich was, I had sent in, I had books that would help reframe circumstances in terms of the challenge, like The Obstacle is the Way.
Amazing book.
Yeah.
Amazing book. One of my favorite ones from Ryan Holiday.
Yep. I had that sent in. I gave that had a big shift on some of the prisoners. I did a lot of my own further spiritual work, some of the deeper stuff of Hawkins, David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force. That was actually the first book of a trilogy. The second book being The Eye of the I, very, very powerful. Anybody that has any level of religious associational connection would love to read, or I'd invite them to read The Eye, as in the eye of the hurricane, EYE, at the center of I, as in the letter I, the eye of me. Yeah, the center of I, the eye of the I. And he just has an eloquence in how he articulates and explains spiritual truth that transcends religious dogma, rules, and man's interpretation throughout the centuries, which has essentially used religion as a vehicle for control. And he has such a sublime way of getting you connected with the essence of the teachings of the masters before a lot of the rules came around to try to misinterpret it. His third book in the trilogy is just called I, Reality and Subjectivity, but that is not for the spiritually timid or faint-hearted. That is a very deep exposition on how to journey into the real depths of hardcore spirituality and understanding. And again, the path is narrow. Waste no time, as he says. But those were my books that I'd focused on. Reality Transurfing is a phenomenal book that I teach a lot of my high-level students, a lot of the techniques from there, and drill down. I've been studying Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeland for probably 10 years now. My Big Toe from Tom Campbell is an incredible book if you have the wherewithal to read it. Tom Campbell has probably had a bigger impact on my understanding of reality and the nature of reality than anybody else. And Tom is a NASA nuclear physicist and one of the world's leading researchers for 40 years in consciousness. So a very pragmatic left brain approach to the right brain inquiry. And My Big Toe, toe standing for theory of everything, builds on Einstein's work in special and general relativity, and really answers most of the equations in quantum mechanics, theology, spirituality, philosophy, religion, and brings it together in a unifying theory that I have yet to find a hole in, having tried to punch hole. I've become good friends with Tom. He's an amazing guy. And we had him as part of our Elite Mentorship Forum bonus call recently. It was just stunning. He was the founding scientist at the Monroe Institute, which is very famous for doing all of the protocols for the CIA for the remote viewing. They invented binaural beats to get the brain to 4 hertz to access point consciousness in meditation, to use intention to do out-of-body experiences in remote viewing. My Big Toe is quite the journey, but it's also 700-800 pages. So not really for the faint-hearted, but when you've got 6 months on your hands, it's an easy read.
Everything comes with a price, even books, even good books. And when I have to do like a hard decision, it's always like everything comes with a price. What was the price of me going to live in Hamburg and leaving my girlfriend at that time here in Sofia, and not spending enough time with her, but being able to see if my corporate career will go on from there, and then leaving this job with very good salary to go back to Bulgaria to do something that had absolutely no monetary income, like the podcast, and having like another business that I was thinking that will help me. Being financially dependent on yourself, like having the back against the wall. So even the books have their price.
One of my business mentors, Peter Thomas, who co-founded the Entrepreneurs Organization. He's in his 80s now, amazing man. Spent a lot of time with Peter over the years. And he taught me a very valuable statement that ties into what you just said, and I'm sure will be valuable for the listeners and viewers as well. When your values are clear, your decisions are easy. The challenge is most people are trying to assess the price because they're trying to weigh up what currently is their most important value, not having a framework for understanding that. And so they're going in the mood, they're looking at different angles because they don't know how to value what they value in a framework that says, no, if I value family more than business, or I value connection more than freedom, then I'm not going to Hamburg. If I value work as a vehicle for me to express myself for growth more than I value currently connection, I'm going to Hamburg. There's no tough decision. There's a clear decision once you know what your values are. And unfortunately, most people have never been taught how to even ask themselves the question, what do I value most in life and in what order? And So therefore they struggle with decisions because they have this inner conflict going on because they don't know how to value something that really would then make it a lot easier. Doesn't make it an easy decision in terms of still moving forward, but it's an easy choice of which to make when it comes to making the choice. You still have to enact it, and choices have consequences, but it's a lot easier to make once you have clear values.
Wow. Okay, Peter, who inspires you?
A lot of people inspire me. I'm inspired every day. I'm inspired by people's stories of how people have turned their lives around having lost their jobs in the pandemic. I look for inspiration in others. If you see yourself, and I know you mentioned at the beginning, you see me as a motivational speaker, and I know that's said with a lot of respect. I see myself as one of the furthest things from a motivational speaker. I tend to demotivate people sometimes because I'm willing to be unpopular for what I believe will serve them. And I'm looking to try to be inspirational. Inspirational lights the fire from within so that you can run off and follow your truth by being pulled forward towards it. Motivation is trying to kick your ass out of the chair so that you go and go to the next part of the 4 yards down the corridor before you need kicking in the butt again. Right? So a lot of the time we need not the happy clappy motivational aspect of the platitudes and the quotes that do the rounds. We need something deeper. We need to be able to have that spark inside of us touched. And that spark inside me gets touched by seeing the heroes in everyday people. It's easy to say, oh, I'm inspired by Nelson Mandela, and I am. He's one of my heroes. I've been very fortunate to work with Mandela's family over the years. I've did a lot of scholarships to my business school through the Nelson Mandela Legacy Foundation. I spent the first Mandela Day at his home with his family. I'm very inspired. He is somebody that you could admire for centuries. But the real heroes, the real people, the people who broke their ankle 3 months into being selected for the Olympics and still pulled it out of the bag. The people that lost their job and still went home and put the comfort of their partner who was having a tough day before their own sob story. The everyday heroes are the people that inspire me the most because that's us. That's us out of the chair, out of the limelight. Again, as I said at the beginning, I'm just a guy. I've been very fortunate to have had access to some of the insights and some of the journeys in life that some people haven't yet had the fortune to be able to have, just as everybody can teach me something in a context that they're an expert in. They don't need the stories, the best-selling books. They don't need any of that. They need them, their story. And you go to a hospice and you sit with people who are coming to terms with their mortality at the end of their life, and you listen to their stories, you will be way more inspired than going to the best-selling Amazon top 10 in personal psychology. I can promise you that.
When did you decide to change the perspective in this way? Because as you were saying in the inside track, and I've read a bit more, like preparing for the interview, you said that you, while you were selling the toys, you decided to go into like personal development, and your dream was to become a motivational speaker. When did you find this like keystone that changes the perspective?
I think that the emotional maturity, for me, I'm very, 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 very fortunate. Was in my late 20s when I became a trainer for Toни Робинс, actually age 30, when I became a trainer for Tony Bell's through his leadership program for 3 years from 27. And that was a process of helping me mature by taking my top driving need at the time, which was significance, trying to prove to the world I was good enough, trying to validate by how many Ferraris I could buy or what class of plane I was flying in and all that kind of stuff, that nobody really cared. Because everybody is the star of their own movie trying to do the same thing. And when I shifted my inner driver from trying to raise my own significance to raising the significance of others, from being driven by trying to prove myself to being driven by growth and contribution, my entire world flipped. Stress dropped through the floor. So I'm no longer looking around or running around in life with a begging bowl saying, please give me some scraps of approval, acceptance, validation, recognition, right? It's never going to happen. None of that will ever be enough. If you're seeking external validation, you will never find enough. It's like crack. You're always going to want more. You're always going to want the next hit. It's always not going to last long enough. If you're internally validated, where you're independent of the good opinion of other people, where you don't need somebody else to come and pat you on the back. I don't need a standing ovation, which is why I usually get one. Because when I get on stage, I focus on how do I serve? How do I add value? Yeah, how can I touch this audience in a way that tells them what I believe they need to hear for their benefit, not for their entertainment? And yeah, a great way to demonstrate that is a lesson I learned from a beautiful soul, Doug, who ran a company called Story Theatre. And I was in 2004, I was at the International Convention for Professional Speakers in Singapore. And I heard him say this, what he called the role of 50. And he says when he goes out on stage, he realizes that what he's saying isn't new. Well, I may have shared some insights here. They're not new. They may have been expressed in a way that's unique to me that may have allowed people to hear them from a different angle. But I don't take credit for anything I've said today. I'm just standing on the shoulders of the giants. I'm just interpreting through my way to be able to express through my uniqueness as everybody else can. There's all the same musical notes on the scale. You just get to rearrange them in a way that's unique to you when you play your own music. But you're not inventing music. You're just expressing it in a way that's unique to you through your self of individuation. But when I go out and I speak, as Doug said, everybody may hear the same thing, but they may have to hear it 50 times before it finally changes their life or finally means something. And every time I go out, I realize that my role isn't to change anybody's life. My role is to move everybody up one. And if they hear it on a podcast, it may be that you're moving people with your messages here, yours from 38 to 39. Amazing. It may be that you're moving them from 13 to 14. And occasionally, luckily, we get to move people from 49 to 50 and boom, they have this epiphany. And it's not because we're great. It's not because we changed their life or any ego issue around that. It's because we were grateful enough to stand on 49 people who went before us that said the same thing to get them to that point where it finally resonates in a way that changes their life. So that's what shifted when I went from trying to get a standing ovation, trying to be good enough, looking for the feedback forms in the audience and hoping they're all 10s and then getting upset about the 2s and all of that stuff, to not caring about. I don't care what people are only going to come at me from the place that they're at. I could tell a joke from stage and half the audience fall out of their seat laughing and half the audience walk out of their seat in disgust. That's not down to the joke. That's down to where the people are at in their own life. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for sharing what I believe to be my truth. And some people are going to think I'm full of shit. And some people are going to be inspired and change their life. That's a measure of their learning and their own truth. That's not a measure of my teaching or my story. Therefore, I can be independent of the good opinion of others, which gives me permission to be authentic. And the more authentic I am, the more people I happen to inspire.
Yeah. As you said, people have BS radar. They do. And I can feel it through the podcast as well. Because having genuine conversations is what brings most the value. Because it's not like me having questions sent to you or to anyone that was a guest on the podcast before or will be after your visit, and having this ping pong game of question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. All right, Peter, there's a person that you know from your events here in Bulgaria, Vesi. She is the creator of this magnificent game called Kiss the Frog Now. It's for team buildings. And this part with the blue cards is personal questions. Personal questions for people to understand better one another. I'm going to take the cards out and ask you, please, to choose one card without knowing which one exactly, without the first one. Yeah, it's a list with randoms.
Yeah.
Please read the question. Yeah, please read the questions out loud. 2 questions, 3 questions.
There you go. So I take one now.
Yep, read it, please.
Okay. Ooh, what would you do if you had an unlimited budget for 1 week?
All right.
You want me to answer that?
Yes, please.
Well, again, money is a magnifier of who you are. It widens your decision space. And so, for me, there is a huge amount of projects that I would like to help with, especially on the island that I live. And specifically, I'm a big fan of dogs, and there's a few dog homes. If I had an unlimited budget, one of the first things I would do is I would go and set up the charities of the dog homes in a way that would offer a a beneficial grant that would transform the lives and the experience of the dogs. That's one of the first things that springs to mind, because it's something that I really want to do. I certainly wouldn't be going to Vegas and blowing it on hookers and coke. That's not going to happen. But an unlimited budget for a week. Again, I'd be asking myself better questions. How much good could I do with that? Because if you turn around and say, what can I get with that? A week later, that's going to be temporary. That's going to be, I've had the Ferraris and the McLarens and the Lamborghini and all that kind of stuff. It's stuff. What matters at the end of life is, what did you do with the gift you got? What legacy are you going to leave? Are you going to be able to leave a thumbprint on humanity in a way that adds value? Well, what an opportunity to be able to do that with something like an unlimited budget for a week. So get excited about, wow, how many smiles could I go put on somebody's face? What options would that open up that I don't normally have that would allow me to go create wow magic moments for people? And that's where the line of inquiry would take me. So that's where I'd be spending my energy if I had an unlimited budget for 1 week, probably starting with the dogs, because I love dogs.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much for answering this question. Thank you for Vesi for creating this game entirely in Bulgaria with Bulgarian drawers, and everything was created here, which it's amazing for this opportunity for people in Bulgaria to create businesses they can work and impact other countries, other companies. And probably something that I've missed to write down that I want to ask you about is something that you picked out of the questions. It's related to money. The metaphor that you gave in one of the materials that I had prior to our interview was amazing. I've never heard a better metaphor about how to make money. And it was relating to the chopping wood and putting it in the heater. And you cannot get heat from the heater without going to the forest, chopping wood, or to the backyard, chopping wood and filling the heater in, lighting it up, and waiting for it to start giving you back the heat. So would you please share some thoughts on people that really want to have money as in regards to making like their dreams possible? Like why they want money is another question, but what do you think is the biggest mistake that people do in regards to money? And can you please elaborate a bit more?
I'm sure there's a lot of people want to hear the answer to that. Well, one of the biggest issues around people not having what they think is enough money is not down to opportunity. Let's just put that on the table, or circumstance, because we live in a time in human history right now where there is more opportunity and lower barriers to entry than ever before. And you see people that have nothing that create from nothing. You see people who have everything stacked against them go out and create tremendous wealth. And you see people who have all of the stuff in their favor and never really produce anything. So it's not circumstance. So let's take that off the table, because most people like say, well, I would have money, but if you have my boss, I live in Bulgaria, our government sucks, our economy, if you're telling yourself that, then there's no way out. You're putting the blame on other people that are outside of your control, so therefore you've got nowhere to turn. So one thing we have to understand to begin with is looking at what money is, and most people don't have enough money because they don't understand what it is. They commoditize it into a thing. Now, as a parallel here, people do the same with time, and I'll explain that briefly because it shows you a very good comparison. What's the most common belief most people have about time?
You don't have it?
I don't have enough. Right? I don't have enough time. I'm busy. Yeah, most people are busy being broke. Right? Because there's a huge difference between how we use our time. But time, even more than money, more than health, more than circumstances, background, the country you're in, time is the only area where every single human is treated equally. We all have 24 hours in a day. So when you say I don't have enough time, as soon as we meant that, or I need to manage my time, we commoditize it into a thing. As if you could walk into the supermarket and buy 2 hours. I don't have enough time. That's okay, go buy a couple of hours. No, that doesn't work. See, time is like the current of a river. It's going to flow no matter what. And you trying to manage time is like standing in the middle of the current of the river trying to manage the current. You can't do it. So people can't manage time. What you want to do is, A, manage your focus, not your time. But your beliefs around time can make a huge difference. See, I believe time serves me. That's a very different belief to I don't have enough. But when it comes to money, same thing. We commoditize it. What is money? Pretty simple. Now, you could ask that to 100 different people and get 100 different replies that are different, but essentially, where did money come from? It was originated as a way to solve the bartering issue. If I got goats, you got chickens, and guess what? I want chickens, you want goats? Baby, we're in business. But if I want chickens and you don't want goats, we've got a problem. So money is essentially an arbitrary medium of exchange that is used to measure perceived value. Keyword being perceived. How much is a house worth? Well, what somebody's prepared to pay. So if you understand that money, therefore, is used as a measurement, it is a byproduct or a consequence of adding value. Yeah, you don't want the goats, but I want the chickens. So you add the chickens to me. I don't need to give you goats now, but I can give you money. It is a measure of value as to what you have given first. And that's where the issue lies for most people. See, when you start chasing money, it's like walking into a gym and saying, right, give me the strength, I'll go lift the weights. Well, that doesn't work. You see, the strength is a byproduct or a consequence of lifting the weights. You get the strength when you lift the weights. You get the money when you add the value. But if you're chasing the medium, then you're never going to be focused on being able to have enough money because you're chasing the wrong thing. Start chasing adding value, and you'll look over your shoulder and think, where did that money come from? But money by itself isn't a thing of itself. We make it a thing because we symbolize it with pieces of paper with dead people on it, or shiny metal or hard rocks. But that's not any. It doesn't have any inherent value. It's a medium of exchange. If you had $1 million worth of Bulgarian currency and there was no economy and you were freezing to death in winter, then guess what? You'd quite happily set fire to it because that's where the value would be. So the whole aspect, same with the wood. If you're sitting there saying, I don't have enough money, what you're actually saying to yourself, but most people won't acknowledge that, is, I haven't found a way to add enough value. Well, I work hard 40 hours a week in a factory for 40 years and I've still got nothing. I didn't say working hard was adding value. If you're putting caps on bottles or pushing lead into wooden pencils, where's the value in that? The same. The value is in being able to risk huge amounts of capital and investment and time to build a factory that can create that so you can sell millions of pencils to the world and get millions of dollars in response, and at the same time pay the person who's pushing the lead into the pencil $10 an hour for doing it. So it's the same with argument. When I see somebody recently said, oh, there was an argument going around about women's sports people need to have fair pay for, and I'm like, why are you making it about a gender gap? That is a different personal issue that you're pushing on there, and you're using a situation that has nothing to do with gender to try to validate your own personal prejudice. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be equality, but if you're making it about gender, you're barking up the wrong tree, because sports people aren't paid based upon gender. They're paid on the business model based upon how many people are paying to watch them. And there's a lot more people that watch guys soccer than there are ladies soccer. Where do the guys get paid from? They get paid from how many tickets are sold, how many people are watching, and therefore you can sell advertising to your sponsors, all of that stuff. So rather than complain about guys get paid more than women, why aren't you instead trying to create a movement that would get more people watching women's soccer? Now, I'm not making it about gender. I'm just teaching you the fact that economics, when it comes to money, isn't about money. It's about what value you add. And so if you want to get more money, then start asking, how can I add more value? Again, asking better questions. Not, why don't I have enough money? Why is that rich idiot over there getting money and I'm not? I'm smarter than him. He's no smarter than me. And you have this internal argument to justify why, at the end of the day, you're not adding as much value, or you haven't found a way to do it. And you don't need qualifications to that. You need intention. I dropped out of school with no qualifications. I don't have any coaching qualifications. I charge $120,000 a year for private one-on-one coaching. That's how much I value my time. That's how much my clients value what I bring to the table. And for that, I think I'm cheap. So when it comes to money, the other aspect is that a lot of people without money think that money will solve their problems. Now, the reason that belief system prevails is because most people without money, their immediate problems can be solved by or are caused by a lack of money and can be solved by money. I can't afford to eat in the restaurant I want. I can't afford to pay the school fees. I can't afford to put new tires on my car. I can't afford to pay the rent. So they make lack of money the problem. And they think, therefore, that by getting money, they won't have any problems. Well, problems are just a way for us to describe challenges we don't like. So if we live in a growth-centric environment, we are going to get challenges. So if you get money, you may solve your immediate low-level money problems, but that doesn't mean to say life's going to be easy. There's a lot more people that are millionaires are on drugs, probably because they can afford it, than there are people that are not. So when it comes to understanding, money will simply magnify your decisions. It'll give you a wider set of decisions. If they decide to do something, in my belief, to be erroneously catastrophic to the human spirit by, let's say, for example, creating vaccine passports to travel, travel for a living. And we want to get controversial. All right? If they push through with that flawed plan under the guise of trying to help people, then luckily I have the ability to go fly a private jet. I'll just go and schedule a jet where I don't have to pander to an airline's insecurity around their dictates from government. Other people don't have that option. So money gives you better options. Now, does it mean my problems go away? Of course not. I look forward to my problems. If I hadn't got if I wasn't able to do $12.5 million with a business in Dubai with Hewlett Packard, I wouldn't have gone to jail. Right? That was the business deal we were arguing over. I get as many problems as everybody else. But it's not about being able to solve your problems. It's about being able to, what is your attitude towards them? And if I think money's going to give me an easy life, then you're in Disneyland. So focus on how much value I can add right now. Start looking at that side. And if you can start solving people's problems, people will pay to get out of pain more than they will, especially in today's economy, than they will to get into pleasure. So if you can start adding value, you add a lot more value to people through solving their problems than you do creating pleasure. Now, both are available, but that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, it's a great recommendation, and this is what I'm trying to do basically since I was operating under my own senses and choices since I was a kid, helping others. Never thought that this is really the basically entrepreneurial mindset, helping others. And here comes my biggest mistake that came probably from my childhood, not being able to ask, to say, okay, you said your one-on-one coaching session for 1 year costs £120,000, but for me, in my mind, it's a question that's directly related to my issues. Is how can I say, okay, I want this amount? How do you describe something that's not? It's see?
One of the biggest problems that keeps people in poverty is that their self-worth is connected to their net worth. And if you really want to know the number one rule in my 30 years of being in personal growth, is what the number one rule in personal growth is, people will never rise above the opinion of themselves. Ever. Doesn't matter how smart you are, how many podcasts you listen to, what books you read, what your parents did. People will never rise above the opinion of themselves. And so many people, especially coming out of a communist culture, have never been given permission to value themselves. They're always told why you're not good enough. They're always looking up at a government that's in charge and therefore feeling less than by default. It's very rare that you'll see somebody that will validate who you are, that brings the best out in who you are, that gets you to believe in you more than you believe in you until you believe in you. That's the role of a coach. And when you start to realize that, okay, what am I worth? Where do my beliefs around money come from? Do I believe that there's never enough? Do I believe that rich people are evil? Where do my beliefs around money come from? Did I look at people working super hard and into the ground and stamping on others, and therefore I have an unconscious disassociation? Did I see my parents fighting over money as a kid, and therefore I link money to violence, or I link money to a loss of connection or dysfunction in the relationship, therefore I'm going to avoid it? When we do an internal belief on our own audit or internal audit on our own money or financial beliefs, you'll realize that we have a financial thermostat. We have an amount of money that we're comfortable earning, and we have an amount of money we're not comfortable earning, both above and below that thermostat. Now, the blow's easy. If you're used to earning 20,000 a year, say euros, and all of a sudden now you drop down to 10,000, you're going to get off your butt and you're going to start hustling. But if you see yourself as a 20,000 a year person, and all of a sudden you start doing well, you start a business and things move up and you start earning 50,000, your sense of self-worth kicks in and say, whoa, what are you doing up here? You don't belong up here. You're going to lose your friends. They're going to hate you. You don't deserve this. Oh, this is just about being lucky. Oh, what if it all goes away? No. You're going to see people distancing. You're going to see yourself doubting yourself. You're going to start feeling uncomfortable and start self-sabotaging. The air conditioning kicks in on the thermostat, and now you're not doing what you really should do. You're not following through on your business plans. You're not getting up early as you did with the same passion that you did, and you start bringing yourself back down to the 20,000 level. And until you learn how to raise your financial thermostat by recognizing how freaking awesome you are, how great you are, how much value do you want to add to the world is a better question than how much do you think you're worth. And then you can start opening up. And if it's too far out of your comfort zone, put steps on the ladder. Get comfortable with 30,000. Go earn it. Hang out there. It's not too far above the heat threshold you're starting to tolerate. You're starting to acclimatize. Go for 50. Start moving up that way. But understand that if you get to 50 and you haven't shifted your thermostat or acclimatized from 20, you are going to bring yourself back down. And you don't have to listen to me to say that. Look in the rearview mirror of your life and see the highways that you've driven down and all of the ups and downs financially that you've gone through, and it'll pretty self-validate.
Awesome. As a finale to our amazing conversation, I want to go quickly through, if possible, quickly. It's totally up to you.
I'll try my best.
Mud and stars.
Oh, wow.
It's a very nice metaphor of life, of owning your problems, of not being reactive and saying, okay, I didn't deserve that. It's someone else to blame, whatever. How did this story came in your mind too? How did you, what was the inspiration that basically hit you and you're like, okay, I'm writing this?
Well, when I went inside, I knew that I was there on a secret mission. I knew the universe had guided me into prison. That's why I was never in danger. I never felt threatened. I was never fearful of any of the violence because I knew the universe, God, life was taking care of me. And I couldn't see being sent in there and being put in danger and not being looked after because I was there to serve. So for me, I knew that the best way to help the prisoners was to leverage my time. I'd already got pretty busy one-on-one. And when I was being let out in the wing, at some point I had like a whole group of prisoners around me that would come to seek my counsel, my coaching and help. And I thought, I need to help more people. I need to leverage my time. The other thing was, going back to what you said earlier, you cannot tell somebody what to do. So I needed to do it third party, like you mentioned, through the stories. Because if, again, you turn around to remind the viewers and say, hey, I know what you should do is this, your party is going to say, well, okay, I may be interested, but the bigger party is thinking, fuck you, right? It's like, no, you don't know me. You don't know my story. How dare you tell me what you think and judge me for what you think I should do? So we start bringing all that narrative to protect ourselves from the awareness that we may not be good enough. But if you're sitting next to a couple of people and they're having that conversation and you're listening in, your defenses are down because it's not about you. So I wrote this story as a third party about this guy that comes into prison. It's his first time. He wasn't expecting it. He's deer in the headlights. He's scared. He's nervous. He's angry one minute. He's confused and upset the next. And as he's being processed in the waiting room, he sits next to this wise old prisoner, been around the block, been there. They're kind of the sovereign figure. And they have this conversation. And I called the story Mud or Stars, taken after the old adage that two men sat behind prison bars, one saw mud, the other saw stars. And this conversation that this new, young, naive prisoner has changes his entire life, his perspective, and his ability to deal with the situation that he's faced. And ultimately, there's a lot of lessons in there. And that way I could kind of get in some of my coaching to the prisoners without them thinking they were being coached. And it created a movement. I found myself in a place in Pentonville, which never happens. I was in class and we were left unsupervised because a supply teacher hadn't turned up and the teacher had to lock us in the classroom. Now, I'd written this out by hand, but I was in the class and there was a printer and a computer and I'm like, let's do it. And I literally just, while everybody else is looking for staplers to steal and, and other stuff, rummaging through drawers to try to grab stuff, I'm at the computer, I'm locked on. Now I can speed type fairly well. I knock out this story, I hit 50 copies print. And I smuggled them under my jumper, and when the teacher came back and we left, I went distributing over the next 2 days when I'm walking to class or in the wing. I was sliding them under doors, cell doors at random. I was pinning them up on the notice board. I was leaving them on tables as I was walking through the wing. And after a few days, you could start hearing people shout mud or stars to each other to try to cheer themselves up, to cope with the nightmare that most of them had thought themselves into. And there was so much in there. I mean, ultimately, the message behind it is that our circumstances never define us. They simply give us the opportunity to define ourselves. That freedom is not something that can be taken away. Liberty can be taken away, but freedom is a state of mind. I was freer in my little cell than most of the prison officers that were free to leave and come back each day, but were returning to a dysfunctional relationship they hadn't got the courage or the tools to fix, or who hated their job but didn't have the courage to leave because they needed the salary. I was way freer than all of those guys, trapped in my little, tiny cell, smaller than this room. And that was a huge awakening for so many people. It also got them to understand the power of acceptance. See, acceptance shouldn't be confused with resignation. Resignation is where you feel powerless and therefore you feel apathetic because you feel trapped. You feel frustrated because you can't do anything.
That's what media does.
Yeah, 100%. Acceptance means, okay, I've come to terms with the situation. Now what do I do about it? That's when you ask better questions. But you can't ask better questions if you're still stuck resisting what happens. You have a parent die. Yeah, both my parents are now gone. You have a parent die. A lot of people are like, why me? Why now? Can you change that? Of course not. Nothing's going to bring them back. Why did they abandon me if they're coming from a victim mentality? Yes. But instead, if you say, okay, my father has passed away. It may have been sudden. But did he have his wish? Well, what was his wish? Well, I think it's every parent's wish that their children outlive them. Of course, we never get to choose when, and it's always too soon. But is that not the effect of life? I said every relationship ends. Either one or both partners will die, or you will walk a different path. And I don't care if that's a relationship with your parents, your partner, your soulmate, your kids, your car, your business, or your body. At some point, by the very nature of being physical, your destination is non-physical. That's part of the rule set. That's why if you identify more with the non-physical part of you, you don't fear death as the end. Death isn't the opposite of life at that awareness, it's the opposite of birth. You get rid of this old body and you go pick up a new one somewhere. Go star in your next movie when you finish your final scene in this one. Now, is that truth? Nobody knows. But it's far better to have an empowering belief system around something that's inevitable than sit there worrying about it. And so, for me, Mud or Stars was a way to try to open up the hearts and minds of the prisoners. And it's funny, I just had an email a couple of days ago printing 30,000 copies of Mud or Stars currently in Nevada for the prisoners in Nevada and North Texas. For people out there, it's creating such an impact. And this is now in prison. It's been translated into so many different languages. It's just a short story. But I wrote that with an intention to how do I help people who feel like there's no help? How do I shift their mindset? Because you're not going to change people's behavior by changing their skill set. If you're running around trying to learn new skills so you can change your life, I've got news for you. You won't. You'll simply have more skills with which to live the same life. That's why if you're learning more money-making opportunities and starting different business ideas, but you haven't raised your financial thermostat, you're just going to find different ways of earning the same amount of money. You'll have variety, but you won't have growth. Outer world follows inner world. So Mud or Stars was kind of my gift to the prisons. It's what I won the award for. And it was really just aimed at trying to help people and leverage my time because I couldn't get out of the cell enough to help the people I wanted to. So I did it through that story, and it's gone on to change thousands and thousands of lives.
Peter, thank you so much for being on the Superhuman podcast with Georgi Nenov. It's a literal translation to it, but it was never thought about being like a name that sounds very well and easy to abbreviate in English. Thank you for taking your time. Thank you to Dimo and his wife for bringing you here in Sofia. This is like something that's surreal and I believe that we shared so much great wisdom with the people, and I'm asking them to pick one thing and then pass it forward to the people that know that are going to be influenced and helped by your time and what you shared today. It's a dream come true. Hopefully, I will keep showing the people in Bulgaria that if you put value in other people's lives, good things will happen to you.
100%. And I have to say a huge and a massive thank you, not just for the privilege of being on this incredible podcast, but for what you're doing, the story that you have and where you came from and how to be able to build this is testimony to everything we've spoken about today, about being able to put yourself in a place of service and contribution, and the thousands and thousands of lives that you're changing, and the medium that you've created to go and help spread the word of people becoming superhuman is something I'm in awe of. So thank you for giving me the privilege to hopefully leave a little thumbprint on some of the listeners in a way that adds value.
Thank you. Guys, this was the Superhuman Podcast, a special episode with Peter Sage here. I'm sorry for my English, probably a bit rusty since I have spent some time in Bulgaria not using it very often, but this a small disclaimer that this is not my native tongue and I might have made a number of mistakes. Forgive me for that, promise to improve. Thank you for being with the Superhuman Podcast today. It goes on live every Tuesday in Bulgarian, and you can find it on any podcast player or even on YouTube. This podcast will have also subtitles for everyone who is not comfortable with his English, so everyone can share it to other non-native speakers and people that don't have the English proficiency to be able to understand it. But it was full with golden nuggets and very, very important truths about how life is formed. And I'm very thankful to you, Peter, for sharing it. Thank you for Dimo for having you here, and to Ani for making this huge connection. Guys, this was everything from this Tuesday. Hope that you liked it. Please pass it forward. Paying forward always helps. See you.